straight to my partners, to Planchet's. Yes, at the pylon door. Well, but shall we not meet again? If you remain in Paris, yes, for I shall stay here. No, after having embraced Raoul, with whom I have appointed a meeting at my hotel, I shall set out immediately for La Fère. Well, adieu, then, dear and true friend. Au revoir, I should rather say, for why can you not come and live with me at Bois? You are free. You are rich. I shall purchase for you, if you like, a handsome estate in the vicinity of Chivigny or Brescia. On the one side you will have the finest woods in the world, which join those of Chambord. On the other, admirable marshes. You who love sporting, and who, whether you admit it or not, are a poet, my dear friend, you will find pheasants, rail, and teal, without counting sunsets and excursions on the water, to make you fancy yourself Nimrod and Apollo themselves. While awaiting the purchase, you can live at La Fère, and we shall go together to fly our hawks among the vines, as Louis XIII used to do. That is a quiet amusement for old fellows like us. D'Artagnan took the hands of Athos in his own. "Dear Count," said he, "I shall say neither yes nor no. Let me pass in Paris the time necessary for the regulation of my affairs, and accustom myself, by degrees, to the heavy and glittering idea which is beating in my brain and dazzles me. I am rich, you see, and from this moment until the time when I shall have acquired the habit of being rich, I know myself, and I shall be an insupportable animal. Now, I am not enough of a fool to wish to appear to have lost my wits before a friend like you, Athos. The cloak is handsome, the cloak is richly gilded, but it is new and does not seem to fit me." Athos smiled. "So be it," said he. "But apropos of this cloak, dear D'Artagnan, will you allow me to offer you a little advice?" "Yes, willingly." "You will not be angry." "Proceed." "When wealth comes to a man late in life or all at once, that man, in order not to change, must most likely become a miser, that is to say, not spend much more money than he had done before, or else become a prodigal, and contract so many debts as to become poor again." "Oh, but what you say looks very much like a sophism, my dear philosophic friend." "I do not think so. Will you become a miser?" "No, pardieu. I was one already, having nothing. Let us change." "Then be prodigal." "Still less. More to you. Debts terrify me. Creditors appear to me, by anticipation, like those devils who turn the damned upon the gridirons, and as patience is not my dominant virtue, I am always tempted to thrash those devils. You are the wisest man I know, and stand in no need of advice from anyone. Great fools must they be who think they have anything to teach you. But are we not at the Rue Saint Honor?" "Yes, dear Athos. Look yonder. On the left, that small, long white house is the hotel where I lodge. You may observe that it has but 2 stories. I occupy the first. The other is let to an officer whose duties oblige him to be absent 8 or 9 months in the year. So I am in that house as in my own home, without the expense." "Oh, how well you manage, Athos! What order and what liberality! They are what I wish to unite. But of what use trying? That comes from birth, and cannot be acquired. You are a flatterer. Well, adieu, dear friend. Apropos, remember me to Master Planchet. He was always a bright fellow. And a man of heart, too, Athos. Adieu." And they separated. During all this conversation, D'Artagnan had not for a moment lost sight of a certain pack-horse, in whose panniers, under some hay, were spread the sacoches, messengers' bags, with a portmanteau. 9 o'clock was striking at St. Mary. Planchet's helps were shutting up his shop. D'Artagnan stopped the postilion who rode the pack-horse at the corner of the Rue des Lombards, under a penthouse, and calling one of Planchet's boys, he desired him not only to take care of the 2 horses, but to watch the postilion, after which he entered the shop of the grocer, who had just finished supper, and who, in his little private room, was, with a degree of anxiety, consulting the calendar, on which, every evening, he scratched out the day that was past. At the moment when Planchet, according to his daily custom, with the back of his pen, Erase another day. D'Artagnan kicked the door with his foot, and the blow made his steel spur jingle. "Oh, good Lord!" cried Planchet. The worthy grocer could say no more. He had just perceived his partner. D'Artagnan entered with a bent back and a dull eye. The Gascon had an idea with regard to Planchet. "Good God," thought the grocer, looking earnestly at the traveler. "He looks sad." The Musketeer sat down. "My dear Monsieur d'Artagnan," said Planchet, with a horrible palpitation of the heart. "Here you are, and your health." "Tolerably good, Planchet, tolerably good," said D'Artagnan, with a profound sigh. "You have not been wounded, I hope?" "Phew! Ah, I see," continued Planchet, more and more alarmed. "The expedition has been a trying one." "Yes," said D'Artagnan. A shudder ran down Planchet's back. "I should like to have something to drink," said the Musketeer, raising his head piteously. Planchet ran to the cupboard and poured out to D'Artagnan some wine in a large glass. D'Artagnan examined the bottle. "Alas, that which you prefer, monsieur," said Planchet, "that good old Anjou wine, which was one day nearly costing us all so dear." "Ah," replied D'Artagnan, with a melancholy smile. "Ah, my poor Planchet, ought I still to drink good wine?" "Come, my dear master," said Planchet, making a superhuman effort, whilst all his contracted muscles, his pallor, and his trembling betrayed the most acute anguish. "Come, I have been a soldier and consequently have some courage. Do not make me linger, dear Monsieur d'Artagnan. Our money is lost, is it not?" Before he answered, D'Artagnan took his time, and that appeared an age to the poor grocer. Nevertheless, he did nothing but turn about on his jay. "And if that were the case," said he, slowly, moving his head up and down, "if that were the case, what would you say, my dear friend?" Planchet, from being pale, turned yellow. It might have been thought he was going to swallow his tongue, so full became his throat, so red were his eyes. 20,000 livres, murmured he. 20,000 livres, and yet— D'Artagnan, with his neck elongated, his legs stretched out, and his hands hanging listlessly, looked like a statue of discouragement. Planchet drew up a sigh from the deepest cavities of his breast. "Well," said he, "I see how it is. Let us be men. It is all over, is it not? The principal thing is, monsieur, that your life is safe." Doubtless, life is something, but I am ruined." D'Artagnan could hold out no longer. "Mordieu," cried he, with great emotion, "thou art a brave fellow on my honor. Planchet, you have not been playing a part, have you? You have not seen the pack horse with the bags under the shed yonder." "What horse? What bags?" said Planchet, whose trembling heart began to suggest that D'Artagnan was mad. "Why, the English bags, mordieu," said D'Artagnan, all radiant, quite transfigured. "Imbecile," cried D'Artagnan, "you think me mad. Mordieu, on the contrary, never was my head more clear, or my heart more joyous. To the bags, Planchet, to the bags." "But to what bags? Good heavens!" D'Artagnan pushed Planchet towards the window. "Under the shed yonder, don't you see a horse?" "Yes." "Don't you see how his back is laden?" "Yes, yes." "Don't you see your lad talking with the postilion?" "Well, you know the name of that lad, because he is your own. Call him." "Abdon, Abdon," vociferated Planchet from the window. "Bring the horse," screamed Planchet. "Now give 10 crowns to the postilion," said D'Artagnan, in the tone he would have employed in commanding a maneuver. "2 lads to bring up the 2 first bags, 2 to bring up the 2 last, and move, mordieu, be lively." Planchet rushed down the stairs, as if the devil had been at his heels. A moment later the lads ascended the staircase, bending beneath their burden. D'Artagnan sent them off to their garrets, carefully closed the door, and addressing Planchet, who, in his turn, looked a little wild. "Now, we are by ourselves," said he, and he spread upon the floor a large cover and emptied the first bag into it. Planchet did the same with the second. Then D'Artagnan, all in a tremble, let out the precious bowels of the third with a knife. When Planchet heard the provoking sound of the silver and gold, when he saw bubbling out of the bags the shining crowns, which glittered like fish from the sweep net, when he felt himself plunging his hands up to the elbow in that still rising tide of yellow and white coins, a giddiness seized him, and like a man struck by lightning, he sank heavily down upon the enormous heap, which his weight caused to roll away in all directions. Planchet, suffocated with joy, had lost his senses. D'Artagnan threw a glass of white wine in his face, which incontinently recalled him to life. "Ah, good heavens! Good heavens! Good heavens!" said Planchet, wiping his mustache and beard. At that time, as they do now, grocers with a cavalier mustache and the lansquenet beard, only the money baths, already rare in those days, have become almost unknown now. "Mordieu," said D'Artagnan, "there are 100,000 crowns for you. Partner, draw your share, if you please, and I will draw mine." "Oh, the lovely sum! Monsieur d'Artagnan, the lovely sum! I confess that half an hour ago I regretted that I had to give you so much, but I now no longer regret it. Thou art a brave grocer, Planchet. There, let us close our accounts, for, as they say, short reckonings make long friends." "Oh, rather. In the first place, tell me the whole history," said Planchet. "That must be better than the money." "Ma foi," said D'Artagnan, stroking his mustache. "I can't say no, and if ever the historian turns to me for information, he will be able to say he has not dipped his bucket into a dry spring. Listen, then, Planchet, I will tell you all about it." "And I shall build piles of crowns," said Planchet. "Begin, my dear master." "Well, this is it," said D'Artagnan, drawing breath. "And that is it," said Planchet, picking up his first handful of crowns. Chapter 39. Mazarin's Gaming Party. In a large chamber of the Palais Royal, hung with a dark-colored velvet, which threw into strong relief the gilded frames of a great number of magnificent pictures, on the evening of the arrival of the two Frenchmen, the whole court was assembled before the alcove of M. le Cardinal de Mazarin, who gave a card party to the king and queen. A small screen separated three prepared tables. At one of these tables the king and the two queens were seated. Louis XIV, placed opposite to the young queen, his wife, smiled upon her with an expression of real happiness. Anne of Austria held the cards against the cardinal, and her daughter-in-law assisted her in the game, when she was not engaged in smiling at her husband. As for the cardinal, who was lying on his bed with a weary and careworn face, his cards were held by the Comtesse de Soissons, and he watched them with an incessant look of interest and cupidity. The cardinal's face had been painted by Bernouin, but the rouge, which glowed only on his cheeks, threw into stronger contrast the sickly pallor of his countenance and the shining yellow of his brow. His eyes alone acquired a more brilliant luster from this auxiliary, and upon those sick man's eyes were, from time to time, turned the uneasy looks of the king, the queen, and the courtiers. The fact is, that the two eyes of the Senior Mazarin were the stars more or less brilliant, in which the France of the 17th century read its destiny every evening and every morning. Monseigneur neither won nor lost. He was, therefore, neither gay nor sad. It was a stagnation in which, full of pity for him, Anne of Austria would not have willingly left him, but in order to attract the attention of the sick man by some brilliant stroke, she must have either won or lost. To win would have been dangerous, because Mazarin would have changed his indifference into an ugly grimace. To lose would likewise have been dangerous, because she must have cheated, and the Infanta, who watched the game, would, doubtless, have exclaimed against her partiality for Mazarin. Profiting by this calm, the courtiers were chatting. When not in a bad humor, M. de Mazarin was a very debonair prince, and he, who prevented nobody from singing, provided they paid, was not tyrant enough to prevent people from talking, provided they made up their minds to lose. They were therefore chatting. At the first table, the king's younger brother, Philip, ducked into, was admiring his handsome face in the glass of a box. His favorite, the Chevalier de Lorraine, leaning over the back of the prince's chair, was listening, with secret envy, to the Comte de Guiche, another of Philip's favorites, who was relating in choice terms of various vicissitudes of fortune of the royal adventurer Charles II. He told, as so many fabulous events, all the history of his peregrinations in Scotland, and his terrors when the enemy's party was so closely on his track, of nights spent in trees, and days spent in hunger and combats. By degrees, the fate of the unfortunate king interested his auditors so greatly that the play languished even at the royal table, and the young king, with a pensive look and downcast eye, followed, without appearing to give any attention to it, the smallest details of his odyssey, very picturesquely related by the Comte de Guiche. The Comtesse de Soissons interrupted the narrator. Confess, Count, you are inventing. Madam, I am repeating like a parrot all the stories related to me by different Englishmen. To my shame, I am compelled to say I am as exact as a copy. Charles II would have died before he could have endured all that. Louis XIV raised his intelligent and proud head. Madam, said he, in a grave tone, still partaking something of the timid child, Monsieur le Cardinal will tell you that during my minority the affairs of France were in jeopardy, and that if I had been older and obliged to take sword in hand, it would sometimes have been for the evening meal. Thanks to God, said the Cardinal, who spoke for the first time, your Majesty exaggerates, and your supper has always been ready with that of your servants. The king colored. Oh, cried Philip, inconsiderately, from his place, and without ceasing to admire himself. I recollect once, at Melun, the supper was laid for nobody, and that the king ate 2/3 a slice of bread, and abandoned to me the other third. The whole assembly, seeing Mazarin smile, began to laugh. Courtiers flatter kings with the remembrance of past distresses, as with the hopes of future good fortune. It is not to be denied that the crown of France has always remained firm upon the heads of its kings, and of Austria hasten to say, and that it has fallen off of that of the King of England, and when by chance that crown oscillated a little, for there are throne quakes as well as earthquakes, every time, I say, that rebellion threatened it, a good victory restored tranquility. With a few gems added to the crown, said Mazarin. The Comte de Guiche was silent. The king composed his countenance, and Mazarin exchanged looks with and of Austria, as if to thank her for her intervention. It is of no consequence, said Philip, smoothing his hair. My cousin Charles is not handsome, but he is very brave, and fought like a lanzknecht, and if he continues to fight thus, no doubt he will finish by gaining a battle like Rocroi. He has no soldiers, interrupted the Chevalier de Lorraine. The King of Holland, his ally, will give him some. I would willingly have given him some if I had been King of France. Louis XIV blushed excessively. Mazarin affected to be more attentive to his game than ever. By this time, resumed the Comte de Guiche, the fortune of this unhappy prince is decided. If he has been deceived by Monk, he is ruined. Imprisonment, perhaps death, will finish what exile, battles, and privations have commenced. Mazarin's brow became clouded. Is it certain, said Louis XIV, that His Majesty Charles II has quitted the Hague? Quite certain, Your Majesty, replied the young man. My father has received a letter containing all the details. It is even known that the king has landed at Dover. Some fishermen saw him entering the port. The rest is still a mystery. I should like to know the rest, said Philip impetuously. My brother. Louis XIV colored again. That was the third time within an hour. Ask my Lord Cardinal, replied he, in a tone which made Mazarin and of Austria and everybody else open their eyes. Philip received the reprimand with good grace, and bowed, first smiling at his brother, and then his mother. But Mazarin saw from the corner of his eye that a group was about to be formed in the corner of the room, and that the Duc d'Anjou, with the Comte de Guiche and the Chevalier de Lorraine, prevented from talking aloud, might say, in a whisper, what was not convenient should be said. He was beginning, then, to dart at them glances full of mistrust and uneasiness, inviting and of Austria to throw perturbation in the midst of the unlawful assembly, when, suddenly, Bernouin, entering from behind the tapestry of the bedroom, whispered in the ear of Mazarin, Monseigneur, an envoy from His Majesty, the King of England. Mazarin could not help exhibiting a slight emotion, which was perceived by the king. To avoid being indiscreet, rather than to appear useless, Louis XIV rose immediately and, approaching His Eminence, wished him good night. All the assembly had risen with a great noise of rolling of chairs and tables being pushed away. "Let everybody depart by degrees," said Mazarin in a whisper to Louis XIV, "and be so good as to excuse me a few minutes. I am going to dispatch an affair about which I wish to converse with your Majesty this very evening." "And the queens?" asked Louis XIV. At the same time he turned round in his ruelle, the curtains of which, in falling, concealed the bed. The cardinal, nevertheless, did not lose sight of conspirators. "M. le Comte de Guiche," said he, in a fretful voice, whilst putting on, behind the curtain, his dressing gown, with the assistance of Bernouin. "I am here, my lord," said the young man, as he approached. "Take my cards. You are lucky. Win a little money from me of these gentlemen." "Yes, my lord." The young man sat down at the table from which the king withdrew to talk with the two queens. A serious game was commenced between the comte and several rich courtiers. In the meantime, Philip was discussing the questions of dress with the Chevalier de Lorraine, and they had ceased to hear the rustling of the cardinal's silk robe from behind the curtain. His Eminence had followed Bernouin into the closet adjoining the bedroom. Chapter 40. An Affair of State. The cardinal, on passing into his cabinet, found the Comte de la Fère, who was waiting for him, engaged in admiring a very fine Raphael placed over a sideboard covered with plate. His Eminence came in softly, lightly, and silently as a shadow, and surprised the countenance of the Comte, as he was accustomed to do, pretending to divine by the simple expression of the face of his interlocutor what would be the result of the conversation. But this time Mazarin was foiled in his expectation. He read nothing upon the face of Athos, not even the respect he was accustomed to see on all faces. Athos was dressed in black, with a simple lacing of silver. He wore the Holy Ghost, the Garter, and the Golden Fleece, 3 orders of such importance that a king alone, or else a player, could wear them at once. Mazarin rummaged a long time in his somewhat troubled memory to recall the name he ought to give to this icy figure, but he did not succeed. "I am told," said he, at length, "you have a message from England for me." And he sat down, dismissing Bernouin, who, in his quality of secretary, was getting his pen ready. "On the part of His Majesty, the King of England, yes, your Eminence." "I am not an Englishman, but a Frenchman, Monsieur le Cardinal," replied Athos. "It is remarkable that the King of England should choose a Frenchman for his ambassador. It is an excellent augury. Your name, monsieur, if you please." "Comte de la Fère," replied Athos, bowing more slightly than the ceremonial and pride of the all-powerful minister required. Mazarin bent his shoulders, as if to say, "I do not know that name." Athos did not alter his carriage. "And you come, monsieur," continued Mazarin, "to tell me—" "I come on the part of His Majesty, the King of Great Britain, to announce to the King of France—" Mazarin frowned. "To announce to the King of France," continued Athos imperturbably, "the happy restoration of His Majesty Charles II to the throne of his ancestors." This shade did not escape his cunning Eminence. Mazarin was too much accustomed to mankind not to see in the cold and almost haughty politeness of Athos an index of hostility, which was not of the temperature that hothouse called a court. "You have powers, I suppose?" asked Mazarin, in a short, querulous tone. "Yes, Monseigneur." And the word Monseigneur came so painfully from the lips of Athos that it might be said it skinned him. Athos took from an embroidered velvet bag, which he carried under his doublet, a dispatch. The cardinal held out his hand for it. "Your pardon, Monseigneur," said Athos. "My dispatch is for the king. Since you are a Frenchman, monsieur, you ought to know the position of a prime minister at the court of France." "There was a time," replied Athos, "when I occupied myself with the importance of prime ministers, but I have formed, long ago, a resolution to treat no longer with any but the king." "Then, monsieur," said Mazarin, who began to be irritated. "You will neither see the minister nor the king." Mazarin rose. Athos replaced his dispatch in its bag, bowed gravely, and made several steps towards the door. This coolness exasperated Mazarin. "What strange diplomatic proceedings are these?" cried he. "Have we returned to the times when Cromwell sent us bullies in the guise of charges d'affaires? You want nothing, monsieur, but the steel cap on your head and a Bible at your girdle." "Monsieur," said Athos, dryly, "I have never had, as you have, the advantage of treating with Cromwell, and I have only seen his charges d'affaires sword in hand. I am therefore ignorant of how he treated with prime ministers. As for the King of England, Charles II, I know that when he writes to His Majesty King Louis XIV, he does not write to His Eminence the Cardinal Mazarin. I see no diplomacy in that distinction." "Ah!" cried Mazarin, raising his attenuated hand and striking his head. "I remember now." Athos looked at him in astonishment. "Yes, that is it," said the cardinal, continuing to look at his interlocutor. "Yes, that is certainly it. I know you now, monsieur. Ah, diavolo, I am no longer astonished. In fact, I was astonished that, with your Eminence's excellent memory," replied Athos, smiling, "you had not recognized me before. Always refractory and grumbling. Monsieur, what do they call you? Stop, a name of a river. Podemos. No. The name of an island, Naxos. No. Poggiove. The name of a mountain, Athos. Now I have it. Delighted to see you again, and to be no longer at Rouen, where you and your damned companions made me pay ransom. Frond. Still Frond. Accursed Frond. Oh, what grudges! Why, monsieur, have your antipathies survived mine? If anyone had cause to complain, I think it could not be you, who got out of the affair not only in a sound skin, but with a cordon of the Holy Ghost around your neck." "My lord cardinal," replied Athos, "permit me not to enter into considerations of that kind. I have a mission to fulfill. Will you facilitate the means of my fulfilling that mission, or will you not?" "I am astonished," said Mazarin, quite delighted at having recovered his memory, and bristling with malice. "I am astonished, Monsieur Athos, that a Frondeur like you should have accepted a mission for the Mazarin, as used to be said in the good old times." And Mazarin began to laugh, in spite of a painful cough, which cut short his sentences, converting them into sobs. "I have only accepted the mission near the King of France, Monsieur le Cardinal," retorted the Comte, though with less asperity, for he thought he had sufficiently the advantage to show himself moderate. "And yet, Monsieur le Frondeur," said Mazarin gaily, "the affair which you have taken in charge must, from the king, with which I have been given in charge, Monseigneur, I do not run after phase. Be it so. I say that this negotiation must pass through my hands. Let us lose no precious time. Then, tell me the conditions. I have had the honor of assuring your Eminence that only the letter of His Majesty King Charles II contains the revelation of his wishes." "Pooh! You are ridiculous with your obstinacy, Monsieur Athos. It is plain you have kept company with the Puritans yonder. As to your secret, I know it better than you do, and you have done wrongly, perhaps, in not having shown some respect for a very old and suffering man, who has labored much during his life, and kept the field for his ideas as bravely as you have for yours. You will not communicate your letter to me? You will say nothing to me? Very well. Come with me into my chamber. You shall speak to the king, and before the king doth... Now, then, one last word. Who gave you the fleece? I remember you passed for having the garter, but as to the fleece, I do not know." "Recently, my lord, Spain, on the occasion of the marriage of His Majesty Louis XIV, sent King Charles II a brevet of the fleece in blank. Charles II immediately transmitted it to me, filling up the blank with my name." Mazarin arose, and leaning on the arm of Bernouin, he returned to his ruelle at the moment the name of the prince was being announced. The Prince de Condé, the first prince of the blood, the conqueror of Rocroi, Lens, and Nordlingen, was, in fact, entering the apartment of Monseigneur de Mazarin, followed by his gentlemen, and had already saluted the king when the prime minister raised his curtain. Athos had time to see Raoul pressing the hand of the Comte de Guiche and send him a smile in return for his respectful bow. He had time, likewise, to see the radiant countenance of the cardinal when he perceived before him, upon the table, an enormous heap of gold, which the Comte de Guiche had won in a run of luck, after his eminence had confided his cards to him. So, forgetting ambassador, embassy, and prince, his first thought was of the gold. "What?" cried the old man. "All that one." "Some 50,000 crowns. Yes, Monseigneur," replied the Comte de Guiche, rising. "Must I give up my place to your eminence, or shall I continue?" Give up. You are mad. You would lose all you have won. Pass." "My lord," said the Prince de Condé, bowing. "Good evening, Monsieur le Prince," said the minister in a careless tone. "It is very kind of you to visit an old sick friend." "A friend?" murmured the Comte de la Fère, at witnessing with stupor this monstrous alliance of words. "Friends, when the parties are Condé and Mazarin." Mazarin seemed to divine the thought of the Frondeur, for he smiled upon him with triumph, and immediately, "Sire," said he to the king, "I have the honor of presenting to your majesty Monsieur le Comte de la Fère, ambassador from his Britannic Majesty. An affair of state, gentlemen," added he, waving his hand to all who filled the chamber, and who, the Prince de Condé at their head, all disappeared at the simple gesture. Raoul, after a last look cast at the Comte, followed M. de Condé. Philip of Anjou and the Queen appeared to be consulting about departing. "A family affair," said Mazarin, suddenly detaining them in their seats. "This gentleman is a bearer of a letter in which King Charles II, completely restored to his throne, demands an alliance between Monsieur, the brother of the king, and Mademoiselle Henrietta, granddaughter of Henry IV. Will you remit your letter of credit to the king, Monsieur le Comte?" Athos remained for a minute stupefied. How could the minister possibly know the contents of the letter which had never been out of his keeping for a single instant? Nevertheless, always master of himself, he held out the dispatch to the young king, Louis XIV, who took it with a blush. A solemn silence reigned in the cardinal's chamber. It was only troubled by the dull sound of the gold, which Mazarin, with his yellow dry hand, piled up in a casket, whilst the king was reading. Chapter 41. The recital. The maliciousness of the cardinal did not leave much for the ambassador to say. Nevertheless, the word restoration had struck the king, who, addressing the Comte, upon whom his eyes had been fixed since his entrance, "Monsieur," said he, "will you have the kindness to give us some details concerning the affairs of England? You come from that country. You are a Frenchman, and the orders which I see glittering upon your person announce you to be a man of merit as well as a man of quality." "Monsieur," said the cardinal, turning towards the Queen Mother, "is an ancient servant of your Majesty's, Monsieur le Comte de la Fère." Anne of Austria was as oblivious as a queen whose life had been mingled with fine and stormy days. She looked at Mazarin, whose evil smile promised her something disagreeable. Then she solicited from Athos, by another look, an explanation. "Monsieur," continued the cardinal, "was a Three Musketeers in the service of the late king. Monsieur is well acquainted with England, whither he has made several voyages at various periods. He is a subject of the highest merit." These words made allusion to all the memories which Anne of Austria trembled to evoke. England, there was a hatred of Richelieu and a love for Buckingham, a Three Musketeers. There was the whole odyssey of the triumphs which had made the heart of the young woman throb, and of the dangers which had been so near overturning the throne of the young queen. These words had much power, for they rendered mute and attentive all the royal personages, who, with very various sentiments, set about recomposing at the same time the mysteries which the young had not seen, and which the old had believed to be forever effaced. "Speak, Monsieur," said Louis XIV, the first to escape from troubles, suspicions, and remembrances. "Yes, speak," added Mazarin, to whom the little malicious thrust directed against Anne of Austria had restored energy and gaiety. "Sire," said the Comte, "a sort of miracle has changed the whole destiny of Charles II. That which men, till that time, had been unable to do, God resolved to accomplish." Mazarin coughed while tossing about in his bed. King Charles II, continued Athos, left the Hague neither as a fugitive nor a conqueror, but as an absolute king who, after a distant voyage from his kingdom, returns amidst universal benedictions. A great miracle, indeed, said Mazarin. For, if the news was true, King Charles II, who has just returned amidst benedictions, went away amidst musket shots. The king remained impassible. Philip, younger and more frivolous, could not repress a smile, which flattered Mazarin as an applause at his pleasantry. "It is plain," said the king, "there is a miracle, but God, who does so much for kings, Monsieur le Comte, nevertheless employs the hand of man to bring about the triumph of his designs. To what man does Charles II principally owe his re-establishment?" "I ought to know it," replied Louis XIV, resolutely, "and yet I ask my Lord Ambassador the causes of the change in this General Monk." "And your Majesty touches precisely the question," replied Athos, "for without the miracle of which I have had the honor to speak, General Monk would probably have remained an implacable enemy of Charles II. God will that a strange, bold, and ingenious idea should enter into the mind of a certain man, whilst a devoted and courageous idea took possession of the mind of another man. The combinations of these two ideas brought about such a change in the position of M. Monk that, from an inveterate enemy, he became a friend to the deposed king." "These are exactly the details I asked for," said the king. "Who and what are the two men of whom you speak?" "Indeed, I am glad of that." "And the two ideas," said Mazarin. "I am more curious about ideas than about men, for my part." "Yes," murmured the king. "The second idea, the devoted, reasonable idea, the least important, sir, was to go and dig up 1,000,000 in gold, buried by King Charles I at Newcastle, and to purchase with that gold the adherents of Monk." "Oh, said Mazarin, reanimated by the word million. "But Newcastle was at the time occupied by Monk." "Yes, Monsieur le Cardinal, and that is why I venture to call the idea courageous as well as devoted. It was necessary, if Monk refused the offers of the negotiator, to reinstate King Charles II in possession of this million, which was to be torn, as it were, from the loyalty and not the royalism of General Monk. This was effected in spite of many difficulties. The general proved to be loyal and allowed the money to be taken away. It seems to me, said the timid, thoughtful king, that Charles II could not have known of this million whilst he was in Paris. It seems to me, rejoined the cardinal, maliciously, that His Majesty the King of Great Britain knew perfectly well of this million, but that he preferred having 2 millions to having 1. Sire, said Athos, firmly, the King of England, whilst in France, was so poor that he had not even money to take the post, so destitute of hope that he frequently thought of dying. He was so entirely ignorant of the existence of the million at Newcastle, that but for a gentleman, one of your Majesty's subjects, the moral depositary of the million, who revealed the secret to King Charles II, that prince would still be vegetating in the most cruel forgetfulness. Let us pass on to the strange, bold, and ingenious idea, interrupted Mazarin, whose sagacity foresaw a check. What was that idea? This M. Monk formed the only obstacle to the re-establishment of the fallen king. A Frenchman imagined the idea of suppressing this obstacle. Oh, but he is a scoundrel, that Frenchman, said Mazarin, and the idea is not so ingenious as to prevent its author being tied up by the neck at the place to grieve, by decree of the Parliament. Your Eminence is mistaken, replied Athos, dryly. I did not say that the Frenchman in question had resolved to assassinate M. Monk, but only to suppress him. The words of the French language have a value which the gentlemen of France know perfectly. Besides, this is an affair of war, and when men serve kings against their enemies, they are not to be condemned by Parliament. God is their judge. This French gentleman, then, formed the idea of gaining possession of the person of Monk, and he executed his plan. The king became animated at the recital of great actions. The king's younger brother struck the table with his hand, exclaiming, "Ah, that is fine." He carried off Monk, said the king. Why, Monk was in his camp. And the gentleman was alone. Sire, that is marvelous, said Philip. Marvelous, indeed, cried the king. Good. There are the two little lions unchained, murmured the cardinal, and with an air of spite, which he did not dissemble. I am unacquainted with these details. Will you guarantee their authenticity, monsieur? All the more easily, my lord cardinal, from having seen the events. You have? Yes, monseigneur. The king had involuntarily drawn close to the count. The duc d'Anjou had turned sharply round and pressed Athos on the other side. What next, monsieur? What next? Cried they both at the same time. Sire, M. Monk, being taken by the Frenchmen, was brought to King Charles II at The Hague. The king gave back his freedom to Monk, and the grateful general, in return, gave Charles II the throne of Great Britain, for which so many valiant men had fought in vain. Philip clapped his hands with enthusiasm. Louis XIV, more reflective, turned towards the Comte de la Fere. Is this true? Said he, in all its details. Absolutely true, sire, that one of my gentlemen knew the secret of the million and kept it. Yes, sire. The name of that gentleman? It was your humble servant, said Athos, simply and bowing. A murmur of admiration made the heart of Athos swell with pleasure. He had reason to be proud, at least. Mazarin, himself, had raised his arms towards heaven. Monsieur, said the king, I shall seek and find means to reward you. Athos made a movement. Oh, not for your honesty. To be paid for that would humiliate you, but I owe you a reward for having participated in the restoration of my brother, King Charles II. Certainly, said Mazarin. It is a triumph of a good cause which fills the whole house of France with joy, said and of Austria. I continue, said Louis XIV. Is it also true that a single man penetrated to Monk in his camp and carried him off? That man had 10 auxiliaries, taken from a very inferior rank. And nothing but them, nothing more. And he is named Monsieur d'Artagnan, formerly lieutenant of the Musketeers of your Majesty, and of Austria-colored. Mazarin became yellow with shame. Louis XIV was deeply thoughtful, and a drop of moisture fell from his pale brow. What men, murmured he, and, involuntarily, he darted a glance at the minister which would have terrified him if Mazarin, at the moment, had not concealed his head under his pillow. Monsieur, said the young Duc d'Anjou, placing his hand, delicate and white as that of a woman, upon the arm of Athos, tell that brave man, I beg you, that Monsieur, brother of the king, will tomorrow drink his health before 500 of the best gentlemen of France. And, on finishing these words, the young man, perceiving that his enthusiasm had deranged one of his ruffles, set to work to put it to rights with the greatest care imaginable. Let us resume business. Sire, interrupted Mazarin, who never was enthusiastic and who wore no ruffles. Yes, monsieur, replied Louis XIV. Pursue your communication, monsieur le comte, added he, turning towards Athos. Athos immediately began and offered in due form the hand of the Princess Henrietta Stuart to the young prince, the king's brother. The conference lasted an hour, after which the doors of the chamber were thrown open to the courtiers, who resumed their places as if nothing had been kept from them in the occupations of that evening. Athos then found himself again with Raoul, and the father and son were able to clasp each other's hands. Chapter 42, in which Mazarin becomes prodigal. Whilst Mazarin was endeavoring to recover from a serious alarm he had just experienced, Athos and Raoul were exchanging a few words in a corner of the apartment. Well, here you are at Paris. Then, Raoul, said the Comte. Yes, monsieur, since the return of le Prince. I cannot converse freely with you here, because we are observed, but I shall return home presently, and shall expect you as soon as your duty permits. Raoul bowed, and, at that moment, le Prince came up to them. The prince had a clear and keen look which distinguishes birds of prey of the noble species. His physiognomy itself presented several distinct traits of this resemblance. It is known that in the Prince de Condé, the aquiline nose rose out sharply and incisively from brow slightly retreating, rather low than high, and according to the railers of the court, a pitiless race even for genius, constituted rather an eagle's beak than a human nose, in the air of the illustrious princes of the House of Condé. This penetrating look, this imperious expression of the whole countenance generally disturbed those to whom the prince spoke, more than either majesty or regular beauty could have done in the conqueror of Rocroi. Besides this, the fire mounted so suddenly to his projecting eyes, that with the prince every sort of animation resembled passion. Now, on account of his rank, everybody at the court respected le Prince, and many even, seeing only the man, carried their respect as far as terror. Louis de Condé then advanced towards the Comte de la Fere and Rouen, with the marked intention of being saluted by the one and of speaking to the other. No man bowed with more reserved grace than the Comte de la Fere. He disdained to put into a salutation all the shades which a courtier ordinarily borrows from the same color, the desire to please. Athos knew his own personal value, and bowed to the prince like a man, correcting by something sympathetic and undefinable that which might have appeared offensive to the pride of the highest rank in the inflexibility of his attitude. The prince was about to speak to Raoul. Athos forestalled him. "If le Vicomte de Bragelonne," said he, "were not one of the humble servants of your Royal Highness, I would beg him to pronounce my name before you, mon prince." "I have the honor to address Monsieur le Comte de la Fere," said Condé instantly. "My protector," added Raoul, blushing. "One of the most honorable men in the kingdom," continued the prince. "One of the first gentlemen of France, and of whom I have heard so much that I have frequently desired to number him among my friends." "An honor of which I should be unworthy," replied Athos, "but for the respect and admiration I entertain for your Royal Highness." "That is true, my lord, but nowadays soldiers have generals." This compliment, which savoured so little of flattery, gave a thrill of joy to the man whom already Europe considered a hero, and who might be thought to be satiated with praise. "I regret very much," continued the prince, "that you should have retired from the service, Monsieur le Comte, for it is more than probable that the king will soon have a war with Holland or England, and opportunities for distinguishing himself would not be wanting for a man who, like you, knows Great Britain as well as you do France. I believe I may say, Monseigneur, that I have acted wisely in retiring from the service," said Athos, smiling. "France and Great Britain will henceforward live like two sisters, if I can trust my presentiments." "Your presentiments?" "Stop, Monseigneur, listen to what is being said yonder, at the table of my lord the cardinal." "Where they are playing?" "Yes, my lord." The cardinal had just raised himself on one elbow, and made a sign to the king's brother, who went to him. "My lord," said the cardinal, "pick up, if you please, all those gold crowns." And he pointed to the enormous pile of yellow and glittering pieces which the Comte de Guiche had raised by degrees before him by a surprising run of luck at play. "Those 50,000 crowns, yes, Monseigneur, they are yours. Do you give them to me?" "I have been playing on your account, Monseigneur," replied the cardinal, getting weaker and weaker, as if this effort of giving money had exhausted all his physical and moral faculties. "Oh, good heavens!" exclaimed Philip, mild with joy. "What a fortunate day!" And he himself, making a rake of his fingers, drew a part of the sum into his pockets, which he filled, and still full third remained on the table. "Chevalier," said Philip to his favourite, "the Chevalier de Lorraine, come hither, Chevalier." The favourite quickly obeyed. "Pocket the rest," said the young prince. This singular scene was considered by the persons present only as a touching kind of family fate. The cardinal assumed the airs of a father with the sons of France, and the two young princes had grown up under his wing. No one then imputed to pride, or even impertinence, as would be done nowadays, this liberality on the part of the first minister. The courtiers were satisfied with envying the Prince Dot. The king turned away his head. "I never had so much money before," said the young prince, joyously, as he crossed the chamber with his favourite to go to his carriage. "No, never. What a weight these crowns are! But why has Monsieur le Cardinal given all this money at once?" asked M. le Prince of the Comte de la Fere. He must be very ill, the dear cardinal. Yes, my lord, very ill. Without doubt, he looks very ill, as your royal highness may perceive. But surely he will die of it. 150,000 crowns. Oh, it is incredible. But come tell me a reason for it. Patience. Monseigneur, I beg of you. Here comes M. le Duc d'Anjou, talking with the Chevalier de Lorraine. I should not be surprised if they spared us the trouble of being indiscreet. Listen to them. In fact, the Chevalier said to the prince in a low voice, My lord, it is not natural for M. Mazarin to give you so much money. Take care. You will let some of the pieces fall. My lord, what design has the cardinal upon you to make him so generous? As I said, whispered Athos in the prince's ear, that, perhaps, is the best reply to your question. Tell me, my lord, repeated the Chevalier impatiently, as he was calculating, by weighing them in his pocket, the quota of the sum which had fallen to his share by rebound. My dear Chevalier, a wedding present. How a wedding present? Hey, yes, I am going to be married, replied the Duc d'Anjou, without perceiving. At the moment, he was passing the prince and Athos, who both bowed respectfully. The Chevalier darted at the young Duke a glance so strange and so malicious that the Comte de la Fere quite started on beholding it. You to be married, repeated he. Oh, that's impossible. You would not commit such a folly. Bah! I don't do it myself. I'm made to do it, replied the Duc d'Anjou. But come, quick, let us get rid of our money. Thereupon he disappeared with his companion, laughing and talking, whilst all heads were bowed on his passage. Then, whispered the prince to Athos, that is the secret. It was not I that told you so, my lord. He is to marry the sister of Charles II? I believe so. The prince reflected for a moment, and his eyes shot forth one of its not unfrequent flashes. Humph, said he slowly, as if speaking to himself. Our swords are once more to be hung on the wall, for a long time, and he sighed. All that sigh contained of ambition silently stifled, of extinguished illusions and disappointed hopes. Athos alone divined, for he alone had heard that sigh. Immediately after, the prince took leave and the king left the apartment. Athos, by a sign made to Bragelonne, renewed the desire he had expressed at the beginning of the scene. By degrees the chamber was deserted, and Mazarin was left alone, a prey to suffering which he could no longer dissemble. Bernouin, cried he, in a broken voice. What does Monseigneur want? Ganneau, let Ganneau be sent for, said his Eminence. I think I'm dying. Bernouin, in great terror, rushed into the cabinet to give the order, and the piqueur, who hastened to fetch the physician, passed the king's carriage in the Rue Saint-Honor. Chapter 43. Ganneau. The cardinal's order was pressing. Ganneau quickly obeyed it. He found his patient stretched on his bed, his legs swelled, his face livid, and his stomach collapsed. Mazarin had a severe attack of gout. He suffered tortures with the impatience of a man who has not been accustomed to resistances. On seeing Ganneau, "Ah," said he, "now I am saved." Ganneau was a very learned and circumspect man, who stood in no need of the critiques of Boileau to obtain a reputation. When facing a disease, if it were personified in a king, he treated the patient as a Turk treats a Mole. He did not, therefore, reply to Mazarin as the minister expected, "Here is the doctor. Goodbye, disease." On the contrary, on examining his patient with a very serious air, Oh, said he. Hey, what? Ganneau, how you look at me. I look as I should on seeing your complaint. My lord, it is a very dangerous one. The gout? Oh, yes, the gout. With complications, my lord. Mazarin raised himself upon his elbow, and, questioning by look and gesture, "What do you mean by that? Am I worse than I believe myself to be?" "My lord," said Ganneau, seating himself beside the bed, "your Eminence has worked very hard during your life. Your Eminence has suffered much. But I am not old, I fancy. The late M. de Richelieu was but 17 months younger than I am when he died, and died of a mortal disease. I am young. Ganot, remember, I am scarcely 52. Oh, my lord, you are much more than that. How long did the front last? For what purpose do you put such a question to me? For medical calculation, Monseigneur. Well, some 10 years, off and on. Very well. Be kind enough to reckon every year of the Fronde is 3 years. That makes 30. Now 20 and 52 make 72 years. You are 72, my lord, and that is a great age. While saying this, he felt the pulse of his patient. This pulse was full of such fatal indications that the physician continued, notwithstanding the interruptions of the patient. Put down the years of the Fronde for each, and you have lived 82 years. Are you speaking seriously, Ganot? Alas, yes, Monseigneur. You take a roundabout way, then, to inform me that I am very ill. My voix, yes, my lord, and with a man of the mind and courage of your eminence, it ought not to be necessary to do. The cardinal breathed with such difficulty that he inspired pity even in a pitiless physician. There are diseases and diseases, resumed Mazarin. From some of them people escape. Is it not? Cried Mazarin, almost joyously. For, in short, what else would be the use of power, of strength of will? What would the use of genius be, your genius, Ganot? What would be the use of science and art if the patient, who disposes of all that, cannot be saved from peril? Ganot was about to open his mouth, but Mazarin continued. Remember, said he, I am the most confiding of your patients. Remember I obey you blindly, and that consequently. I know all that, said Ganot. I shall be cured, then. Monseigneur, there is neither strength of will, nor power, nor genius, nor science that can resist a disease which God doubtless sends, or which he casts upon the earth at the creation, with full power to destroy and kill mankind. When the disease is mortal, it kills, and nothing can. Is my disease mortal? Asked Mazarin. Yes, my lord. His eminence sank down for a moment, like an unfortunate wretch who is crushed by a falling column. But the spirit of Mazarin was a strong one, or rather his mind was a firm one. Ganot, said he, recovering from his first shock, you will permit me to appeal from your judgment. I will call together the most learned men of Europe. I will consult them. I will live, in short, by the virtue of I care not what remedy. My lord must not suppose, said Ganot, that I have the presumption to pronounce alone upon an existence so valuable as yours. I have already assembled all the good physicians and practitioners of France and Europe. There were 12 of them. And they said that your eminence was suffering from a mortal disease. I have the consultation signed in my portfolio. If your eminence will please to see it, you will find the names of all the incurable diseases we have met with. There is first. No, cried Mazarin, pushing away the paper. No, Ganot, I yield. And a profound silence, during which the cardinal resumed his senses and recovered his strength, succeeded to the agitation of this scene. There is another thing, murmured Mazarin. There are empirics and charlatans. In my country, those whom physicians abandon run the chance of a quack, who kills them 10 times but saves them 100 times. Has not your eminence observed that during the last month I have changed my remedies 10 times? Yes. Well, that ends it, murmured the cardinal. That ends it. And he threw a melancholy look upon the riches which surrounded him. And must I quit all that? Sighed he. I am dying, Ganot, I am dying. Oh, not yet, my lord, said the physician. Mazarin seized his hand. In what time? Asked he, fixing his 2 large eyes upon the impassible countenance of the physician. My lord, we never tell that. To ordinary men, perhaps not, but to me, whose every minute is worth a treasure. Tell me, Ganot, tell me. No, my lord. I insist upon it. I tell you. Oh, give me a month, and for every one of those 30 days I will pay you 100,000 crowns. My lord, replied Ganot in a firm voice, it is God who can give you days of grace, and not I God only allows you a fortnight. The cardinal breathed a painful sigh and sank back upon his pillow, murmuring, Thank you, Ganot, thank you. The physician was about to depart. The dying man, raising himself up, Silence, said he, with flaming eyes, silence. My lord, I have known this secret 2 months. You see that I have kept it faithfully. Go, Ganot, I will take care of your fortunes. Go and tell Brienne to send me a clerk called M. Colbert. Go. Chapter 44. Colbert. Colbert was not far off. During the whole evening he had remained in one of the corridors, chatting with Bernouin and Brienne, and commenting, with the ordinary skill of people of a court, upon the news which developed like air bubbles upon the water, on the surface of each event. It is doubtless time to trace, in a few words, one of the most interesting portraits of the age, and to trace it with as much truth, perhaps, as contemporary painters have been able to do. Colbert was a man in whom the historian and the moralist have an equal right. He was 13 years older than Louis XIV, his future master, of middle height, rather lean than otherwise. He had deep-set eyes, a mean appearance. His hair was coarse, black and thin, which, said the biographers of his time, made him take early to the skullcap, a look of severity, or harshness even, a sort of stiffness, which, with inferiors, was pride, with superiors an affectation of superior virtue, a surly cast of countenance upon all occasions, even when looking at himself in a glass alone. Such is the exterior of this personage. As to the moral part of his character, the depth of his talent for accounts, and his ingenuity in making sterility itself productive, were much boasted of. Colbert had formed the idea of forcing governors of frontier places to feed the garrisons without pay, with what they drew from contributions. Such a valuable quality made Mazarin think of replacing Hubert, his intendant, who had recently died, by M. Colbert, who had such skill in nibbling down allowances. Colbert by degrees crept into court, notwithstanding his lowly birth, for he was the son of a man who sold wine as his father had done, but who afterward sold cloth and then silk stuffs. Colbert, destined for trade, had been clerk in Lyons to a merchant, whom he had quitted to come to Paris in the office of a Châtelet procurer named Biturn. It was here he learned the art of drawing up an account, and the much more valuable one of complicating it. The stiffness of men in Colbert had been of great service to him. It is so true that fortune, when she has a caprice, resembles those women of antiquity, who, when they had a fancy, were disgusted by no physical or moral defects in either men or things. Colbert, placed with Michel Letelier, Secretary of State in 1648, by his cousin Colbert, Seigneur de Saint-Penange, who protected him, received one day from the Minister commission for Cardinal Mazarin. His eminence was then in the enjoyment of flourishing health, and the bad years of the Fronde had not yet counted triple and quadruple for him. He was at Sedan, very much annoyed at a court intrigue in which Anne of Austria seemed inclined to desert his cause. Of this intrigue Letelier held the thread. He had just received a letter from Anne of Austria, a letter very valuable to him, and strongly compromising Mazarin. But, as he already played the double part which served him so well, and by which he always managed two enemies so as to draw advantage from both, either by embroiling them more and more or by reconciling them, Michel Letelier wished to send Anne of Austria's letter to Mazarin, in order that he might be acquainted with it, and consequently pleased with his having so willingly rendered him a service. To send the letter was an easy matter. To recover it again after having communicated it, that was a difficulty. Letelier cast his eyes around him, and seeing the black and meagre clerk with the scowling brow, scribbling away in his office, he preferred him to the best gendarme for the execution of this design. When shall I have the answer, Monseigneur? Tomorrow. Tomorrow morning? Yes, monsieur. The clerk turned upon his heel, after making his very best bow. The next day he was at his post at 7 o'clock. Mazarin made him wait till 10. He remained patiently in the antechamber. His turn having come, he entered, Mazarin gave him a sealed packet. On the envelope of this packet were these words, Monsieur Michel Letelier, etc. Colbert looked at the packet with much attention. The cardinal put on a pleasant countenance and pushed him towards the door. "And the letter of the Queen Mother, my lord?" asked Colbert. "It is with the rest, in the packet," said Mazarin. "Oh, very well," replied Colbert, and placing his hat between his knees, he began to unseal the packet. Mazarin uttered a cry. "What are you doing?" said he, angrily. "I am unsealing the packet, my lord." "You mistrust me, then, master pedant, do you? Did anyone ever see such impertinence?" "Oh, my lord, do not be angry with me. It is certainly not your eminence's word I place in doubt. God forbid." "What then?" "It is the carefulness of your chancery, my lord. What is a letter? A rag. May not a rag be forgotten? And look, my lord, look if I was not right. Your clerks have forgotten the rag. The letter is not in the packet." "You are an insolent fellow, and you have not looked," cried Mazarin, very angrily. "But gone and wait my pleasure." While saying these words, with perfectly Italian subtlety, he snatched the packet from the hands of Colbert and re-entered his apartments. But this anger could not last so long as not to be replaced in time by reason. Mazarin, every morning, on opening his closet door, found the figure of Colbert like a sentinel behind the bench, and this disagreeable figure never failed to ask him humbly, but with tenacity, for the Queen Mother's letter. Mazarin could hold out no longer, and was obliged to give it up. He accompanied this restitution with a most severe reprimand, during which Colbert contented himself with examining, feeling, even smelling, as it were, the paper, the characters, and the signature, neither more nor less than if he had to deal with the greatest forger in the kingdom. Mazarin behaved still more rudely to him, but Colbert, still impassible, having obtained a certainty that the letter was a true one, went off as if he had been deaf. This conduct obtained for him afterwards a post of Hubert, for Mazarin, instead of bearing malice, admired him, and was desirous of attaching so much fidelity to himself. It may be judged by this single anecdote what the character of Colbert was. Events, developing themselves, by degrees allowed all the powers of his mind to act freely. Colbert was not long in insinuating himself into the good graces of the cardinal. He became even indispensable to him. The clerk was acquainted with all his accounts without the cardinal's ever having spoken to him about them. This secret between them was a powerful tie, and this was why, when about to appear before the master of another world, Mazarin was desirous of taking good counsel in disposing of the wealth he was so unwillingly obliged to leave in this world. After the visit of Ganneau, he therefore sent for Colbert, desired him to sit down, and said to him, "Let us converse, Monsieur Colbert, and seriously, for I am very ill, and I may chance to die." "I know you have, Monseigneur." "At 40,560,200 livres, 9 cents, 8 farthings, replied Colbert. The cardinal heaved a deep sigh, and looked at Colbert with wonder, but he allowed a smile to steal across his lips. "Known money," added Colbert, in reply to that smile. The cardinal gave quite a start in bed. "What do you mean by that?" said he. "I mean," said Colbert, "that besides those 40,560,200 livres, 9 cents, 8 farthings, there are 13 millions that are not known." "Oof," sighed Mazarin, "what a man!" At this moment the head of Bernouin appeared through the embrasure of the door. "What is it?" asked Mazarin, "and why do you disturb me?" "The Theoden father, your eminence's director, was sent for this evening, and he cannot come again to my lord till after tomorrow." Mazarin looked at Colbert, who rose and took his hat, saying, "I shall come again, my lord." Mazarin hesitated. "No, no," said he. "I have as much business to transact with you as with him. Besides, you are my other confessor, and what I have to say to one the other may hear. Remain where you are, Colbert. But, my lord, if there be no secret of penitence, will the director consent to my being here?" "Do not trouble yourself about that. come into the ruelle. I can wait outside, Monseigneur. No, no. It will do you good to hear the confession of a rich man. Colbert bowed and went into the ruelle. Introduce the Audin father, said Mazarin, closing the curtains. Chapter 45. Confession of a Man of Wealth. The Audin entered deliberately, without being too much astonished at the noise and agitation which anxiety for the cardinal's health had raised in his household. Come in, my reverend father, said Mazarin, after a last look at the ruelle. Come in and console me. Begin by sitting down and making yourself comfortable, for I am going to begin with a general confession. You will afterwards give me a good absolution, and I shall believe myself more tranquil. My lord, said the father, you are not so ill as to make a general confession urgent, and it will be very fatiguing. Take care. Ah, that is true. Yes, the recital may be long. The mercy of God is great, snuffled the Audin. Stop, said Mazarin. There I begin to terrify myself with having allowed so many things to pass which the Lord might reprove. Is not that always so? Said the Audin naively, removing further from the lamp his thin-pointed face, like that of a mole. Sinners are so forgetful beforehand, and scrupulous when it is too late. Sinners, replied Mazarin. Do you use that word ironically, and to reproach me with all the genealogies I have allowed to be made on my account, I, the son of a fisherman, in fact. Asterisk, this is quite untranslatable, it being a play upon the words pêcheur, a sinner, and pêcheur, a fisherman. It is in very bad taste. Trans. Said the Audin. That is a first sin, father, for I have allowed myself made to descend from 2 old Roman consuls, Estiganius Massarinus first, Massarinus II, and Proculus Massarinus III, of whom the Chronicle of Highlander speaks. From Massarinus to Mazarin the proximity was tempting. Massarinus, a diminutive, means leanish, poorish, out of case. Oh, reverend father, Mazarini may now be carried to the augmentative mega, thin as Lazarus. Look, and he showed his fleshless arms. In your having been born of a family of fishermen, I see nothing injurious to you, for St. Peter was a fisherman, and if you are a prince of the church, my lord, he was the supreme head of it. Pass on, if you please. So much the more for my having threatened with the Bastille a certain Bonnet, a priest of Avignon, who wanted to publish a genealogy of the Casa Mazarini much too marvelous. To be probable, replied the Audin. Oh, if I had acted up to his idea, father, that would have been the vice of pride, another sin. It was excessive wit, and a person is not to be reproached with such sorts of abuses. Pass on. I was all pride. Look you, father, I will endeavor to divide that into capital sins. I like divisions when well made. I am glad of that. You must know that in 1630, alas, that is 31 years ago. You were then 29 years old, Monseigneur. A hot-headed age. I was then something of a soldier, and I threw myself at Casol into the arquebuscades to show that I rode on horseback as well as an officer. It is true, I restored peace between the French and the Spaniards. That redeems my sin a little. I see no sin in being able to ride well on horseback, said the Audin, that is in perfect good taste, and does honor to our gown. As a Christian, I approve of your having prevented the effusion of blood. As a monk, I am proud of the bravery a monk has exhibited. Mazarin bowed his head humbly. Yes, said he, but the consequences. What consequences? Ay, that damned sin of pride has roots without end. From the time that I threw myself in that manner between 2 armies, that I had smelt powder and face lines of soldiers, I have held generals a little in contempt. Ah, said the father, there is the evil, so that I have not found one endurable since that time. The fact is, said the Audin, that the generals we have had have not been remarkable. Oh, cried Mazarin, there was Monsieur le Prince. I have tormented him thoroughly. He is not much to be pitied. He has acquired sufficient glory and sufficient wealth. That may be, for Monsieur le Prince, but M. Beaufort, for example, whom I held suffering so long in the dungeon of Vincennes. Ah, but he was a rebel, and the safety of the state required that you should make a sacrifice. Pass on. I believe I have exhausted pride. There is another sin which I'm afraid to qualify. I can qualify it myself. Tell it. A great sin, Reverend Father. We shall judge, Monseigneur. You cannot fail to have heard of certain relations which I have had with Her Majesty the Queen Mother, the malevolent. The malevolent, my lord, are fools. Was it not necessary for the good of the state and the interests of the young king that you should live in good intelligence with the queen? Pass on, pass on. I assure you, said Mazarin, you remove a terrible weight from my breast. These are old trifles. Look for something serious. I have had much ambition, Father. That is the march of great minds and things, my lord. Even the longing for the tiara. To be pope is to be the first of Christians. Why should you not desire that? It has been printed that, to gain that object, I had sold Cambria to the Spaniards. You have, perhaps, yourself written pamphlets without severely persecuting pamphletees. Then, Reverend Father, I have truly a clean breast. I feel nothing remaining but slight peccadilloes. What are they? Play. That is rather worldly, but you are obliged by the duties of greatness to keep a good house. I like to win. No player plays to lose. I cheated a little. You took your advantage. Pass on. The Theotin moved neither his arms nor his lips. What are you waiting for, Father? Said Mazarin. The end of what? Of the confession, monsieur. But I have ended. Oh, no, your eminence is mistaken. Not that I know of. I have searched as well as possible. Then I shall assist your memory. Do. The Theotin coughed several times. You have said nothing of avarice, another capital sin, nor of those millions, said he. What millions? Father. Why, those you possess, my lord. Because, see you, our opinions differ. You say that money is yours, whilst I believe it is rather the property of others. Mazarin lifted his cold hand to his brow, which was beaded with perspiration. How so? Stammered he. This way. Your Excellency has gained much wealth, in the service of the king. Whatever it may be, whence came that wealth? From the state. The state, that is the king. But what do you conclude from that? Father, said Mazarin, who began to tremble. I cannot conclude without seeing a list of the riches you possess. Let us reckon a little, if you please. You have the bishopric of Metz. Yes. The abbeys of St. Clement, St. Arnaud, and St. Vincent, all at Metz. Yes. You have the abbey of St. Denis, in France, a magnificent property. Yes, Father. You have the abbey of Cluny, which is rich. That of St. Medard at Soissons, with a revenue of 100,000 livres. I cannot deny it. That of St. Victor at Marseilles, one of the best in the south. Yes, Father, a good million a year, with the emoluments of the cardinalship and the ministry. I say too little when I say 2 millions a year. Hey! In 10 years, that is 20 millions, and 20 millions put out at 50% give. By progression, 23 millions in 10 years. How well you reckon for the rotten. Since your eminence placed our order in the convent we occupy, near Saint-Germain-des-Prés, in 1641, I have kept the accounts of the society. And mine likewise, apparently, Father. One ought to know a little of everything, my lord. Very well. Conclude at present. I conclude that your baggage is too heavy to allow you to pass through the gates of paradise. Shall I be damned? If you do not make restitution, yes. Mazarin uttered a piteous cry. Restitution. But to whom? Good God. To the owner of that money, to the king. But the king did not give it all to me. One moment. Does not the king sign the ordinances? Mazarin passed from sighs to groans. Absolution, absolution, cried he. Impossible, my lord. Restitution, restitution, replied the Duotin. But you absolve me from all other sins. Why not from that? Because, replied the father, to absolve you for that motive would be a sin for which the king would never absolve me, my lord. Thereupon the confessor quitted his penitent with an air full of compunction. He then went out in the same manner he had entered. "Oh, good God!" groaned the cardinal. "Come here, Colbert, I am very, very ill indeed, my friend." Chapter 46. The Donation. Colbert reappeared beneath the curtains. "Have you heard?" said Mazarin. "Alas, yes, my lord." "Can he be right? Can all this money be badly acquired?" "The Duotin, Monseigneur, is a bad judge in matters of finance," replied Colbert coolly. "And yet it is very possible that, according to his theological ideas, your Eminence has been, in a certain degree, in the wrong. People generally find they have been so when they die. In the first place, they commit the wrong of dying, Colbert." "That is true, my lord. Against whom, however, did the Duotin make out that you had committed these wrongs? Against the king?" Mazarin shrugged his shoulders, as if I had not saved both his state and his finances. "That admits of no contradiction, my lord." "Does it? Then I have received a merely legitimate salary, in spite of the opinion of my confessor." "That is beyond doubt. And I might fairly keep for my own family, which is so needy, a good fortune, the whole, even, of which I have earned." "I see no impediment to that, Monseigneur." "I felt assured that in consulting you, Colbert, I should have good advice," replied Mazarin, greatly delighted. Colbert resumed his pedantic look. "My lord," interrupted he, "I think it will be quite as well to examine whether what the Duotin said is not a snare." "Oh, no, a snare? What for? The Duotin is an honest man. He believed your Eminence to be at death's door, because your Eminence consulted him. Did not I hear him say, 'Distinguish that which the king has given you from that which you have given yourself'? Recollect, my lord, if he did not say something a little like that to you, that is quite a theatrical speech." "That is possible. In which case, my lord, I should consider you as required by the Duotin to make restitution," cried Mazarin, with great warmth. "Hey, I do not say no." "What, of all? You do not dream of such a thing. You speak just as a confessor did. To make restitution of a part, that is to say, His Majesty's part, and that, Monseigneur, may have its dangers. Your Eminence is too skillful a politician not to know that, at this moment, the king does not possess 150,000 livres clear in his coffers." "That is not my affair," said Mazarin, triumphantly. "That belongs to M. le Surintendant Fouquet, whose account I gave you to verify some months ago." "Well, but I am not the superintendent of His Majesty's finances. I have my post. Surely I would do much for His Majesty's welfare. Some legacy, but I cannot disappoint my family." "The legacy of a part would dishonor you and offend the king. Leaving a part to His Majesty is to avow that that part has inspired you with doubts as to the lawfulness of the means of acquisition. Monsieur Colbert, I thought your Eminence did me the honor to ask my advice." "Yes, but you are ignorant of the principal details of the question." "I am ignorant of nothing, my lord. During 10 years, all the columns of figures which are found in France have passed in review before me, and if I have painfully nailed them into my brain, they are there now so well riveted, that, from the office of M. Letelier, who is sober, to the little secret largesses of M. Fouquet, who is prodigal, I could recite, figure by figure, all the money that is spent in France from Marseilles to Cherbourg." "Then, you order me throw all my money into the coffers of the king," cried Mazarin, ironically, and from whom, at the same time, the gout forced painful moans. Surely the king would reproach me with nothing, but he would laugh at me while squandering my millions, and with good reason. Your Eminence has misunderstood me. I did not, the least in the world, pretend that His Majesty ought to spend your money. You said so clearly, it seems to me, when you advised me to give it to him. "Ah," replied Colbert, "that is because your Eminence, absorbed as you are by your disease, entirely loses sight of the character of Louis XIV. How so? That character, if I may venture to express myself thus, resembles that which my lord confessed just now to the Lieutenant. Go on. That is, pride. Pardon me, my lord. Haughtiness, nobleness. Kings have no pride. That is a human passion. Pride. Yes, you are right. Next. Well, my lord, if I have divined rightly, your Eminence is but to give all your money to the king, and that immediately. But for what? Said Mazarin, quite bewildered. Because the king will not accept of the whole. What? And he a young man, and devoured by ambition. Just so, a young man who is anxious for my death. My lord, to inherit, yes, Colbert, yes, he is anxious for my death in order to inherit. Triple fool that I am, I would prevent him. Exactly. If the donation were made in a certain form, he would refuse it. Well, but how? That is plain enough. A young man who has yet done nothing, who burns to distinguish himself, who burns to reign alone, will never take anything ready-built. He will construct for himself. This prince, Monseigneur, will never be content with the Palais Royal, which M. de Richelieu left him, nor with the Palais Mazarin, which you have had so superbly constructed, nor with the Louvre, which his ancestors inhabited, nor with Saint-Germain, where he was born. All that does not proceed from himself, I predict he will disdain. Saying certain things to him at the same time, I guarantee he will refuse them. But those things, what are they? Well, but after all, what advantage will that be to me? An enormous one. Nobody will afterwards be able to accuse your Eminence of that unjust avarice with which pamphleteers have reproached the most brilliant mind of the present age. You are right, Colbert, you are right. Go and seek the king on my part and take him my will. Your donation, my lord. But if he should accept it, if he should even think of accepting it, then there would remain 13 million for your family, and that is a good round sum. But then you would be either a fool or a traitor. And I am neither the one nor the other, my lord. You appear to be much afraid that the king will accept. You have a deal more reason to fear that he will not accept. But, see you, if he does not accept, I should like to guarantee my 13 reserved millions to him. Yes, I will do so. Yes. But my pains are returning. I shall faint. I am very, very ill. Colbert, I am very near my end. Colbert started. The cardinal was indeed very ill. Large drops of sweat flowed down upon his bed of agony, and the frightful pallor of a face streaming with water was a spectacle which the most hardened practitioner could not have beheld without compassion. Colbert was, without doubt, very much affected, for he quitted the chamber, calling Bernouin to attend the dying man, and went into the corridor. There, walking about with a meditative expression, which almost gave nobility to his vulgar head, his shoulders thrown up, his neck stretched out, his lips half open, to give vent to unconnected fragments of incoherent thoughts, he lashed up his courage to the pitch of the undertaking contemplated. Whilst within 10 paces of him, separated only by a wall, his master was being stifled by anguish which drew from him lamentable cries. Thinking no more of the treasures of the earth, or the joys of paradise, but much of all the horrors of hell, whilst burning hot napkins, physic, revulsives, and Ganot, who was recalled, were performing their functions with increased activity. Colbert, holding his great head in both his hands, to compress within it the fever of the projects engendered by the brain, was meditating the tenor of the donation he would make Mazarin write, at the first hour of respite his disease should afford him. It would appear as if all the cries of the cardinal, and all the attacks of death upon this representative of the past were stimulants for the genius of this thinker with the bushy eyebrows, who was turning already towards a rising sun of a regenerated society. Colbert resumed his place at Mazarin's pillow at the first interval of pain, and persuaded him to dictate a donation thus conceived. About to appear before God, the master of mankind, I beg the king, who was my master on earth, to resume the wealth which his bounty has bestowed upon me, and which my family would be happy to see pass into such illustrious hands. The particulars of my property will be found. They are drawn up at the first requisition of his majesty, or at the last sigh of his most devoted servant, Jules, Cardinal de Mazarin. The cardinal sighed heavily as he signed this. Colbert sealed the packet, and carried it immediately to the Louvre, whither the king had returned. He then went back to his own home, rubbing his hands with the confidence of a workman who has done a good day's work. Chapter 47. How Anne of Austria gave one piece of advice to Louis XIV, and how Anne Fouquet gave him another. The news of the extreme illness of the cardinal had already spread, and attracted at least as much attention among the people of the Louvre as the news of the marriage of Monsieur, the king's brother, which had already been announced as an official fact. Scarcely had Louis XIV returned home, with his thoughts fully occupied with the various things he had seen and heard in the course of the evening, when an usher announced that the same crowd of courtiers who, in the morning, had thronged his levee, presented themselves again at his coucher, a remarkable piece of respect which, during the reign of the cardinal, the court, not very discreet in its preferences, had accorded to the minister, without caring about displeasing the king. But the minister had, as we have said, an alarming attack of gout, and the tide of flattery was mounting towards the throne. Courtiers have a marvelous instinct in scenting the turn of events. Courtiers possess a supreme kind of science. They are diplomatists in throwing light upon the unraveling of complicated intrigues, captains in divining the issue of battles, and physicians in curing the sick. Louis XIV, to whom his mother had taught this axiom, together with many others, understood at once that the cardinal must be very ill. Scarcely had Anne of Austria conducted the young queen to her apartments and taken from her brow the headdress of ceremony, when she went to see her son in his cabinet, where, alone, melancholy and depressed, he was indulging, as if to exercise his will, in one of those terrible inward passions, king's passions, which create events when they break out, and with Louis XIV, thanks to his astonishing command over himself, became such benign tempests, that his most violent, his only passion, that, which Saint Simon mentions with astonishment, was that famous fit of anger which he exhibited 50 years later, on the occasion of a little concealment of the Duc de Main's, and which had for result a shower of blows inflicted with a cane upon the back of a poor valet who had stolen a biscuit. The young king then was, as we have seen, a prey to a double excitement, and he said to himself as he looked in a glass, "O king, king by name, and not in fact, phantom, vain phantom art thou, inert statue, which has no other power than the provoking salutation from courtiers. When wilt thou be able to raise thy velvet arm, or clench thy silken hand? When wilt thou be able to open, for any purpose but to sigh, or smile, lips condemned to the motionless stupidity of the marbles in thy gallery?" Then, passing his hand over his brow, and feeling the want of air, he approached a window, and looking down, saw below some horsemen talking together, and groups of timid observers. These horsemen were a fraction of the watch. The groups were busy portions of the people, to whom a king is always a curious thing, the same as a rhinoceros, a crocodile, or a serpent. He struck his brow with his open hand, crying, "King of France! What title? People of France! What a heap of creatures! I have just returned to my Louvre. My horses, just unharnessed, are still smoking, and I have created interest enough to induce scarcely 20 persons to look at me as I passed. 20! What do I say? No, there were not 20 anxious to see the King of France. There are not even 10 archers to guard my place of residence. Archers, people, guards, all at the Palais Royal. Why, my good God, have not I, the king, the right to ask of you all that?" "Because," said a voice, replying to his, and which sounded from the other side of the door of the cabinet, "because at the Palais Royal lies all the gold, that is to say, all the power of him who desires to reign." Louis turned sharply round. The voice which had pronounced these words was that of Anne of Austria. The king started and advanced towards her. "I hope," said he, "your majesty has paid no attention to the vain declamations which the solitude and disgust familiar to kings suggest to the happiest dispositions." "I only paid attention to one thing, my son, and that was that you were complaining." "Who? I? Not at all," said Louis XIV. "No, in truth, you were, madam. What were you doing? Then I thought I was under the ferule of my professor, and developing a subject of amplification." "My son," replied Anne of Austria, shaking her head, "you are wrong not to trust my word. You are wrong not to grant me your confidence. A day will come, and perhaps quickly, wherein you will have occasion to remember that axiom: gold is universal power, and they alone are kings who are all-powerful. Your intention," continued the king, "was not, however, to cast blame upon the rich men of this age, was it?" "No," said the queen, warmly. "No, sire, they who are rich in this age, under your reign, are rich because you have been willing they should be so, and I entertain against them neither malice nor envy. They have, without doubt, served your majesty sufficiently well for your majesty to have permitted them to reward themselves. That is what I mean to say by the words for which you reproach me. God forbid, madam, that I should ever reproach my mother with anything. Besides," continued Anne of Austria, "the Lord never gives the goods of this world but for a season. The Lord, as corrective to honor and riches, the Lord has placed sufferings, sickness, and death, and no one," added she, with a melancholy smile, which proves you made the application of the funeral precept to herself, "no man can take his wealth or greatness with him to the grave. It results, therefore, that the young gather the abundant harvest prepared for them by the old." Louis listened with increased attention to the words which Anne of Austria, no doubt, pronounced with a view to console him. "Madam," said he, looking earnestly at his mother, "one would almost say in truth that you had something else to announce of me." "I have absolutely nothing, my son. Only you cannot have failed to remark that His Eminence the Cardinal is very ill." Louis looked at his mother, expecting some emotion in her voice, some sorrow in her countenance. The face of Anne of Austria appeared a little changed, but that was from sufferings of quite a personal character. Perhaps the alteration was caused by the cancer which had begun to consume her breast. "Yes, madam," said the king. "Yes, M. de Mazarin is very ill, and it would be a great loss to the kingdom if God were to summon His Eminence away." "Is not that your opinion as well as mine, my son?" said the queen. "Yes, madam, yes, certainly, it would be a great loss to the kingdom," said Louis, culling. "But the peril does not seem to me to be so great. Besides, the cardinal is still young." The king had scarcely ceased speaking when an usher lifted the tapestry and stood with a paper in his hand, waiting for the king to speak to him. "What have you there?" asked the king. "A message from M. de Mazarin," replied the usher. "Give it to me," said the king, and he took the paper. But at the moment he was about to open it, there was a great noise in the gallery, the antechamber, and the court. Ah, said Louis XIV, who doubtless knew the meaning of that triple noise. "How could I say there was but one king in France? I was mistaken. There are two." As he spoke or thought thus, the door opened, and the superintendent of the finances, Fouquet, appeared before his nominal master. It was he who made the noise in the antechamber. It was his horses that made the noise in the courtyard. In addition to all this, a loud murmur was heard along his passage, which did not die away till some time after he had passed. It was this murmur which Louis XIV regretted so deeply not hearing as he passed, and dying away behind him. "He is not precisely a king, as you fancy," said Anne of Austria to her son. "He is only a man who is much too rich. That is all." While saying these words, a bitter feeling gave to these words of the queen a most hateful expression, whereas the brow of the king, calm and self-possessed, on the contrary, was without the slightest wrinkle. He nodded, therefore, familiarly to Fouquet, whilst he continued to unfold the paper given to him by the usher. Fouquet perceived this movement, and with a politeness at once easy and respectful, advanced towards the queen, so as not to disturb the king. Louis had opened the paper, and yet he did not read it. He listened to Fouquet paying the most charming compliments to the queen upon her hand and arm. Anne of Austria's frown relaxed a little. She even almost smiled. Fouquet perceived that the king, instead of reading, was looking at him. He turned half round, therefore, and while continuing his conversation with the queen, faced the king. "You know, Monsieur Fouquet," said Louis, "how ill Mazarin is." "Yes, sire, I know that," said Fouquet. "In fact, he is very ill. I was at my country house of Vaux when the news reached me, and the affair seemed so pressing that I left at once." "You left Vaux this evening, monsieur?" "An hour and a half ago. Yes, your majesty," said Fouquet, consulting a watch richly ornamented with diamonds. "An hour and a half," said the king, still able to restrain his anger, but not to conceal his astonishment. "I understand you, sire. Your majesty doubts my word, and you have reason to do so, but I have really come in that time, though it is wonderful. I received from England 3 pairs of very fast horses, as I had been assured. They were placed at distances of 4 leagues apart, and I tried them this evening. They really brought me from Vaux to the Louvre in an hour and a half, so your majesty sees I have not been cheated." The queen mother smiled with something like secret envy, but Fouquet caught her thought. "Thus, madam," he promptly said, "such horses are made for kings, not for subjects, for kings ought never to yield to anyone in anything." The king looked up. "And yet," interrupted Anne of Austria, "you are not a king that I know of, M. Fouquet." "Truly not, madam. Therefore the horses only await the orders of His Majesty to enter the royal stables, and if I allowed myself to try them, it was only for fear of offering to the king anything that was not positively wonderful." The king became quite red. Louis started. "I hoped, madam," said Fouquet, much agitated, "that my love for His Majesty, my incessant desire to please him, would serve to compensate the want of etiquette. It was not so much a present that I permitted myself to offer, as the tribute I paid." "Thank you, Monsieur Fouquet," said the king politely, "and I am gratified by your intention, for I love good horses, but you know I am not very rich. You, who are my superintendent of finances, know it better than anyone else. I am not able, then, however willing I may be, to purchase such a valuable set of horses." Fouquet darted a haughty glance at the queen mother, who appeared to triumph at the false position in which the minister had placed himself, and replied, "Luxury is the virtue of kings. Sire, it is luxury which makes them resemble God. It is by luxury they are more than other men. With luxury a king nourishes his subjects and honors them. Under the mild heat of this luxury of kings springs the luxury of individuals, a source of riches for the people. His Majesty, by accepting the gift of these 6 incomparable horses, would stimulate the pride of his own breeders, of Limousin, Poitiers, and Normandy, and this emulation would have been beneficial to all. But the king is silent, and consequently I am condemned." During this speech, Louis was, unconsciously, folding and unfolding Mazarin's paper, upon which he had not cast his eyes. At length he glanced upon it, and uttered a faint cry at reading the first line. "What is the matter, my son?" asked the queen, anxiously, and going towards the king. "From the cardinal," replied the king, continuing to read. Yes, it is really from him." "Is he worse? Then—" "Read," said the king, passing the parchment to his mother, as if he thought that nothing less than reading would convince Anne of Austria of a thing so astonishing as was conveyed in that paper. Anne of Austria read in turn, and as she read, her eyes sparkled with a joy all the greater from a useless endeavor to hide it, which attracted the attention of Fouquet. "Oh, a regularly drawn-up deed of gift," said she. "A gift?" repeated Fouquet. "Yes," said the king, replying pointedly to the superintendent of finances. "Yes, at the point of death, Monsieur le Cardinal makes me a donation of all his wealth." 40 millions, cried the queen. "Oh, my son, this is very noble on the part of His Eminence, and will silence all malicious rumors. 40 million scraped together slowly, coming back all in one heap to the treasury. It is the act of a faithful subject and a good Christian. And having once more cast her eyes over the act, she restored it to Louis XIV, whom the announcement of the sum greatly agitated. Fouquet had taken some steps backwards and remained silent. The king looked at him and held the paper out to him in turn. The superintendent only bestowed a haughty look of a second upon it, then bowing, "Yes, sire," said he, "a donation, I see." "You must reply to it, my son," said Anne of Austria. "You must reply to it, and immediately." "But how, madam?" "By a visit to the cardinal." "Why, it is but an hour since I left his eminence," said the king. "Right, then, sire." "Right," said the young king, with evident repugnance. "Well," replied Anne of Austria, "it seems to me, my son, that a man who has just made such a present has a good right to expect to be thanked for it with some degree of promptitude." Then turning towards Fouquet, "Is not that likewise your opinion, monsieur? That the present is worth the trouble?" "Yes, madam," said Fouquet, with a lofty air that did not escape the king. "Accept, then, and thank him," insisted Anne of Austria. "What says M. Fouquet?" asked Louis XIV. "Does your majesty wish to know my opinion?" "Yes." "Thank him, sire." "Ah," said the queen. "But do not accept," continued Fouquet. "And why not?" asked the queen. "You have yourself said why, madam," replied Fouquet. "Because kings cannot and ought not to receive presents from their subjects." The king remained silent between these two contrary opinions. "But 40 millions," said Anne of Austria, in the same tone as that in which, at a later period, poor Marie Antoinette replied, "You will tell me as much." "I know," said Fouquet, laughing. 40 millions makes a good round sum, such a sum as could almost temper royal conscience. "But, monsieur," said Anne of Austria, "instead of persuading the king not to receive this present, recall to his majesty's mind, you, whose duty it is, that these 40 millions are a fortune to him." "It is precisely, madam, because these 40 millions would be a fortune that I will say to the king, 'Sire, if it be not decent for a king to accept from a subject 6 horses, worth 20,000 livres, it would be disgraceful for him to owe a fortune to another subject, more or less scrupulous in the choice of the materials which contributed to the building up of that fortune. It ill becomes you, monsieur, to give your king a lesson," said Anne of Austria. "Better procure for him 40 millions to replace those you make him lose." "The king shall have them whenever he wishes," said the superintendent of finances, bowing. "Yes, by oppressing the people," said the queen. "And were they not oppressed, madam," replied Fouquet, "when they were made to sweat the 40 millions given by this deed? Furthermore, His Majesty has asked my opinion. I have given it. If His Majesty asks my concurrence, it will be the same." "Nonsense. Accept, my son, accept," said Anne of Austria. "You are above reports and interpretations." "Refuse, sire," said Fouquet. "As long as a king lives, he has no other measure but his conscience, no other judge than his own desires, but when dead, he has posterity which applauds or accuses." "Thank you, mother," replied Louis, bowing respectfully to the queen. "Thank you, Monsieur Fouquet," said he, dismissing the superintendent civilly. "Do you accept?" asked Anne of Austria once more. "I shall consider of it," replied he, looking at Fouquet. Chapter 48. Agony. The day that the deed of gift had been sent to the king, the cardinal caused himself to be transported to Vincennes. The king and the court followed him thither. The last flashes of this torch still cast splendor enough around to absorb all other lights in its rays. Besides, as it has been seen, the faithful satellite of his minister, young Louis XIV, marched to the last minute in accordance with his gravitation. The disease, as Ganot had predicted, had become worse. It was no longer an attack of gout. It was an attack of death. Then there was another thing which made that agony more agonizing still, and that was the agitation brought into his mind by the donation he had sent to the king, and which, according to Colbert, the king ought to send back unaccepted to the cardinal. The cardinal had, as we have said, great faith in the predictions of his secretary, but the sum was a large one, and whatever might be the genius of Colbert, from time to time the cardinal thought to himself that the Ordin also might possibly have been mistaken, and that there was at least as much chance of his not being damned as there was of Louis XIV sending back his millions. Besides, the longer the donation was in coming back, the more Mazarin thought that 40 millions were worth a little risk, particularly of so hypothetic a thing as the soul. Mazarin, in his character of cardinal and prime minister, was almost an atheist and quite a materialist. Every time that the door opened, he turned sharply round towards that door, expecting to see the return of his unfortunate donation. Then, deceived in his hope, he fell back again with a sigh, and found his pain so much the greater for having forgotten them for an instant. Anne of Austria had also followed the cardinal. Her heart, though age had made it selfish, could not help evincing towards the dying man a sorrow which he owed him as a wife, according to some, and as a sovereign, according to others. She had, in some sort, put on a mourning countenance beforehand, and all the court wore it as she did. Louis, in order not to show on his face what was passing at the bottom of his heart, persisted in remaining in his own apartments, where his nurse alone kept him company. The more he saw the approach of the time when all constraint would be at an end, the more humble and patient he was, falling back upon himself, as all strong men do when they form great designs, in order to gain more spring at the decisive moment. Extreme unction had been administered to the cardinal, who, faithful to his habits of dissimulation, struggled against appearances and even against reality, receiving company in his bed as if he only suffered from a temporary complaint. Ganneau, on his part, preserved profound secrecy, wearied with visits and questions. He answered nothing but his eminence is still full of youth and strength, but God wills that which he wills, and when he has decided that man is to be laid low, he will be laid low. These words, which he scattered with a sort of discretion, reserve, and preference, were commented upon earnestly by two persons, the king and the cardinal. Mazarin, notwithstanding the prophecy of Ganneau, still leered himself with a hope, or rather played his part so well, that the most cunning, when saying that he lured himself, proved that they were his dupes. Louis, absent from the cardinal for 2 days, Louis with his eyes fixed upon that same donation which so constantly preoccupied the cardinal. Louis did not exactly know how to make out Mazarin's conduct. The son of Louis XIII, following the paternal traditions, had, up to that time, been so little of a king that, whilst ardently desiring royalty, he desired it with that terror which always accompanies the unknown. Thus, having formed his resolution, which, besides, he communicated to nobody, he determined to have an interview with Mazarin. It was Anne of Austria, who, constant in her attendance upon the cardinal, first heard this proposition of the king's, and transmitted it to the dying man, whom it greatly agitated. For what purpose could Louis wish for an interview? Was it to return the deed, as Colbert had said he would? Was it to keep it, after thanking him, as Mazarin thought he would? Nevertheless, as the dying man felt that the uncertainty increased his torments, he did not hesitate an instant. His Majesty will be welcome. Yes, very welcome, cried he, making a sign to Colbert, who was seated at the foot of the bed, and which the latter understood perfectly. Madam, continued Mazarin, will your Majesty be good enough to assure the king yourself of the truth of what I have just said? Anne of Austria rose. She herself was anxious to have the question of the 40 million settled, the question which seemed to lie heavy on the mind of everyone. Anne of Austria went out. Mazarin made a great effort, and, raising himself up towards Colbert, "Well, Colbert," said he, 2 days have passed away, 2 mortal days, and, you see, nothing has been returned from yonder." "Patience, my lord," said Colbert. "Are you mad, you wretch? You advise me to have patience." "Oh, in sad truth, Colbert, you are laughing at me. I am dying, and you call out to me to wait." "My lord," said Colbert, with his habitual coolness, "it is impossible that things should not come out as I have said. His Majesty is coming to see you, and no doubt he brings back the deed himself." "Do you think so? Well, on the contrary, I'm sure that His Majesty is coming to thank me." At this moment, Anne of Austria returned. On her way to the apartments of her son, she had met with a new empiric. This was a powder which was said to have power to save the cardinal, and she brought a portion of this powder with her. But this was not what Mazarin expected. Therefore he would not even look at it, declaring that life was not worth the pains that were taken to preserve it. But, whilst professing this philosophical axiom, his long-confined secret escaped him at last. That, "Madam," said he, "that is not the interesting part of my situation. I made, 2 days ago, a little donation to the king. Up to this time, from delicacy, no doubt, His Majesty has not condescended to say anything about it. But the time for explanation is come, and I implore your Majesty to tell me if the king has made up his mind on that matter." Anne of Austria was about to reply, when Mazarin stopped her. "The truth, madam," said he, "in the name of heaven, the truth. Do not flatter a dying man with a hope that may prove vain." There he stopped, a look from Colbert telling him that he was on a wrong tack. "I know," said Anne of Austria, taking the cardinal's hand, "I know that you have generously made, not a little donation, as you modestly call it, but a magnificent gift. I know how painful it would be to you if the king—" Mazarin listened, dying as he was, as 10 living men could not have listened. "If the king," replied he, "if the king," continued Anne of Austria, "should not freely accept what you offer so nobly." Mazarin allowed himself to sink back upon his pillow like Pantaloon, that is to say, with all the despair of a man who bows before the tempest, but he still preserved sufficient strength and presence of mind to cast upon Colbert one of those looks which are well worth 10 sonnets, which is to say, 10 long poems. "Should you not," added the queen, "have considered the refusal of the king as a sort of insult?" Mazarin rolled his head about upon his pillow without articulating a syllable. The queen was deceived, or feigned to be deceived, by this demonstration. "Therefore," resumed she, "I have circumvented him with good counsels, and his certain minds, jealous, no doubt, of the glory you are about to acquire by this generosity, have endeavored to prove to the king that he ought not to accept this donation. I have struggled in your favor, and so well have I struggled, that you will not have, I hope, that distress to undergo." "I," murmured Mazarin, with languishing eyes, "I? That is a service I shall never forget for a single minute of the few hours I still have to live. I must admit," continued the queen, "that it was not without trouble I rendered it to your eminence." "Ah, peste! I believe that. Oh, oh! Good God, what is the matter?" "I am burning." "Do you suffer much?" "As much as one of the damned." Colbert would have liked to sink through the floor. "So, then," resumed Mazarin, "your Majesty thinks that the king—" He stopped several seconds. "That the king is coming here to offer me some small thanks." "I think so," said the queen. Mazarin annihilated Colbert with his last look. At that moment the ushers announced that the king was in the antechambers, which were filled with people. This announcement produced a stir of which Colbert took advantage to escape by the door of the ruelle. Anne of Austria rose, and awaited her son, standing. Louis XIV. Appeared at the threshold of the door, with his eyes fixed upon the dying man, who did not even think it worth while to notice that Majesty from whom he thought he had nothing more to expect. An usher placed an armchair close to the bed. Louis bowed to his mother, then to the cardinal, and sat down. The queen took a seat in her turn. Then, as the king looked behind him, the usher understood that look and made a sign to the courtiers who filled up the doorway to go out, which they instantly did. Silence fell upon the chamber with the velvet curtains. The king, still very young, and very timid in the presence of him who had been his master from his birth, still respected him much, particularly now, in the supreme majesty of death. He did not dare, therefore, to begin the conversation, feeling that every word must have its weight not only upon things of this world, but of the next. As to the cardinal, at that moment he had but one thought, his donation. It was not physical pain which gave him that air of despondency and that lugubrious look. It was the expectation of the thanks that were about to issue from the king's mouth and cut off all hope of restitution. Mazarin was the first to break the silence. "Is your Majesty come to make any stay at Vincennes?" said he. Louis made an affirmative sign with his head. "That is a gracious favor," continued Mazarin, "granted to a dying man, and which will render death less painful to him." "I hope," replied the king, "I am come to visit not a dying man, but a sick man susceptible of cure." Mazarin replied by a movement of the head. "Your Majesty is very kind, but I know more than you on that subject. The last visit, sire," said he, "the last visit." "If it was so, Monsieur le Cardinal," said Louis, "I would come a last time to ask the counsels of a guide to whom I owe everything." Anne of Austria was a woman. She could not restrain her tease. Louis showed himself much affected, and Mazarin still more than his two guests, but from very different motives. Here the silence returned. The queen wiped her eyes, and the king resumed his firmness. "I was saying," continued the king, "that I owed much to your eminence." The eyes of the cardinal devoured the king, for he felt the great moment had come. "And," continued Louis, "the principal object of my visit was to offer you very sincere thanks for the last evidence of friendship you have kindly sent me." The cheeks of the cardinal became sunken. His lips partially opened, and the most lamentable sigh he had ever uttered was about to issue from his chest. "Sire," said he, "I shall have despoiled my poor family. I shall have ruined all who belong to me, which may be imputed to me as an error. But, at least, it shall not be said of me that I have refused to sacrifice everything to my king." And of Austria's tears flowed afresh. "My dear Monsieur Mazarin," said the king, in a more serious tone than might have been expected from his youth, "you have misunderstood me, apparently." Mazarin raised himself upon his elbow. "I have no purpose to despoil your dear family, nor to ruin your servants." "Oh, no, that must never be." "Umph," thought Mazarin, "he is going to restore me some scraps. Let us get the largest piece we can." "The king is going to be foolishly affected and play the generous," thought the queen. "He must not be allowed to impoverish himself. Such an opportunity for getting a fortune will never occur again." "Sire," said the cardinal, aloud, "my family is very numerous, and my nieces will be destitute when I am gone." "Oh," interrupted the queen, eagerly, "have no uneasiness with respect to your family, dear Monsieur Mazarin. We have no friends dearer than your friends. Your nieces shall be my children, the sisters of His Majesty, and if a favor be distributed in France, it shall be to those you love." "Smoke," thought Mazarin, who knew better than anyone the faith that can be put in the promises of kings. Louis read the dying man thought in his face. "Be comforted, my dear Monsieur Mazarin," said he, with a half-smile, sad beneath its irony. "The Mademoiselle de Mancini will lose, in losing you, their most precious good, but they shall none the less be the richest heiresses of France. And since you have been kind enough to give me their dowry," the cardinal was panting, "I restore it to them," continued Louis, drawing from his breast and holding towards the cardinal's bed the parchment which contained the donation that, during 2 days, had kept alive such tempests in the mind of Mazarin. "What did I tell you, my lord?" murmured in the alcove a voice which passed away like a breath. "Your Majesty returns my donation," cried Mazarin, so disturbed by joy as to forget his character of a benefactor. "Your Majesty rejects the 40 millions," cried Anne of Austria, so stupefied as to forget a character of an afflicted wife, or queen. "Yes, my lord cardinal. Yes, madam," replied Louis XIV, tearing the parchment which Mazarin had not yet ventured to clutch. "Yes, I annihilate this deed, which despoiled a whole family. The wealth acquired by His Eminence in my service is his own wealth and not mine." "But, sire, does your Majesty reflect," said Anne of Austria, "that you have not 10,000 crowns in your coffers?" "Madam, I have just performed my first royal action, and I hope it will worthily inaugurate my reign." "Ah, sire, you are right," cried Mazarin. "That is truly great, that is truly generous which you have just done." And he looked, one after the other, at the pieces of the axe spread over his bed, to assure himself that it was the original and not a copy that had been torn. At length his eyes fell upon the fragment which bore his signature, and recognizing it, he sunk back on his bolster in a swoon. Anne of Austria, without strength to conceal her regret, raised her hands and eyes toward heaven. "Oh, sire," cried Mazarin, "may you be blessed. My God, may you be beloved by all my family. Pabaccio, if ever any of those belonging to me should cause your displeasure, sire, only frown, and I will rise from my tomb." This pantallade did not produce all the effect Mazarin had counted upon. Louis had already passed the considerations of a higher nature, and as to Anne of Austria, unable to obey, without abandoning herself to the anger she felt burning within her, the magnanimity of her son and the hypocrisy of the cardinal, she arose and left the chamber, heedless of thus betraying the extent of her grief. Mazarin saw all this, and fearing that Louis XIV might repent his decision, in order to draw attention another way, he began to cry out, as, at a later period, Scapin was to cry out, in a sublime piece of pleasantry with which the morose and grumbling Boileau dared to reproach Molière. His cries, however, by degrees, became fainter, and when Anne of Austria left the apartment, they ceased altogether. "Monsieur le Cardinal," said the king, "have you any recommendations to make to me?" "Sire," replied Mazarin, "you are already wisdom itself, prudence personified. Of your generosity I shall not venture to speak. That which you have just done exceeds all that the most generous men of antiquity or of modern times have ever done." The king received this praise coldly. "So you confine yourself," said he, "to your thanks, and your experience, much more extensive than my wisdom, my prudence, or my generosity, does not furnish you with a single piece of friendly advice to guide my future." Mazarin reflected for a moment. "You have just done much for me, sire," said he, "that is, for my family." "Say no more about that," said the king. "Well," continued Mazarin, "I shall give you something in exchange for these 40 millions you have refused so royally." Louis XIV indicated by a movement that these flatteries were displeasing to him. "I shall give you a piece of advice," continued Mazarin. "Yes, a piece of advice more precious than the 40 millions. "My Lord Cardinal," interrupted Louis. "Sire, listen to this advice." "I am listening." "Come nearer, sire, for I am weak. Nearer, sire, nearer." The king bent over the dying man. "Sire," said Mazarin, in so low a tone that the breath of his words arrived only like a recommendation from the tomb in the attentive ears of the king. "Sire, never have a prime minister." Louis drew back astonished. The advice was a confession, a treasure, in fact, was a sincere confession of Mazarin. The legacy of the cardinal to the young king was composed of 6 words only, but those 6 words, as Mazarin had said, were worth 40 millions. Louis remained for an instant bewildered. As for Mazarin, he appeared only to have said something quite natural. A little scratching was heard along the curtains of the alcove. Mazarin understood. "Yes, yes," cried he warmly. "Yes, sire, I recommend to you a wise man, an honest man, and a clever man." "Tell me his name, my lord." "His name is yet almost unknown. Sire, it is M. Colbert, my attendant." "Oh, try him," added Mazarin, in an earnest voice. "All that he has predicted has come to pass. He has a safe glance. He is never mistaken either in things or in men, which is more surprising still. Sire, I owe you much, but I think I acquit myself of all towards you in giving you M. Colbert." "So be it," said Louis, faintly, for, as Mazarin had said, the name of Colbert was quite unknown to him, and he thought the enthusiasm of the cardinal partook of the delirium of a dying man. The cardinal sank back on his pillows. "For the present, adieu, sire, adieu," murmured Mazarin. "I am tired, and I have yet a rough journey to take before I present myself to my new master. Adieu, sire." The young king felt the tears rise to his eyes. He bent over the dying man, already half a corpse, and then hastily retired. Chapter 49. The first appearance of Colbert. The whole night was passed in anguish, common to the dying man and to the king. The dying man expected his deliverance. The king awaited his liberty. Louis did not go to bed. An hour after leaving the chamber of the cardinal, he learned that the dying man, recovering a little strength, had insisted upon being dressed, adorned, and painted, and seeing the ambassadors. Like Augustus, he no doubt considered the world a great stage, and was desirous of playing out the last act of the comedy. Anne of Austria reappeared no more in the cardinal's apartments. She had nothing more to do there. Propriety was the pretext for her absence. On his part, the cardinal did not ask for her. The advice the queen had given her son rankled in his heart. Towards midnight, while still painted, Mazarin's mortal agony came on. He had revised his will, and as this will was the exact expression of his wishes, and as he feared that some interested influence might take advantage of his weakness to make him change something in it, he had given orders to Colbert, who walked up and down the corridor which led to the cardinal's bedchamber, like the most vigilant of sentinels. The king, shut up in his own apartment, dispatched his nurse every hour to Mazarin's chamber, with orders to bring him back the exact bulletin of the cardinal's state. After having heard that Mazarin was dressed, painted, and had seen the ambassadors, Louis heard that the prayers for the dying were being read for the cardinal. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Ganneau had administered the last remedy. This was a relic of the old customs of that fencing time, which was about to disappear to give place to another time, to believe that death could be kept off by some good secret thrust. Mazarin, after having taken the remedy, respired freely for nearly 10 minutes. He immediately gave orders that the news should be spread everywhere of a fortunate crisis. The king, on learning this, felt as if a cold sweat were passing over his brow. He had had a glimpse of the light of liberty. Slavery appeared to him more dark and less acceptable than ever. But the bulletin which followed entirely changed the face of things. Mazarin could no longer breathe at all, and could scarcely follow the prayers which a cure of St. Nicholas Deschamps recited near him. The king resumed his agitated walk about his chamber, and consulted, as he walked, several papers drawn from a casket of which he alone had the key. A third time the nurse returned. M. de Mazarin had just uttered a joke, and had ordered his Flora, by Titian, to be revarnished. At length, towards 2 o'clock in the morning, the king could no longer resist his weariness. He had not slept for 24 hours. Sleep, so powerful at his age, overcame him for about an hour. But he did not go to bed for that hour. He slept in a fauteuil. About 4 o'clock his nurse awoke him by entering the room. "Well?" asked the king. "Well, my dear sire," said the nurse, clasping her hands with an air of commiseration. "Well, he is dead." The king arose at a bound, as if a steel spring had been applied to his legs. "Dead?" cried he. "Alas, yes." "Is it quite certain?" "Yes." "Official?" "Yes." "Has the news been made public?" "Not yet." "Who told you, then, that the cardinal was dead?" M. Colbert." "M. Colbert?" "Yes." "And was he sure of what he said?" "He came out of the chamber, and had held a glass for some minutes before the cardinal's lips." "Ah," said the king, "and what has become of M. Colbert?" "He has just left his eminence's chamber." "Where is he?" "He followed me." "So that he is—" "Sire, waiting at your door, till it shall be your good pleasure to receive him." Louis ran to the door, opened it himself, and perceived Colbert standing waiting in the passage. The king started at sight of this statue, all clothed in black. Colbert, bowing with profound respect, advanced 2 steps towards his majesty. Louis re-entered his chamber, making Colbert a sign to follow. Colbert entered. Louis dismissed the nurse, who closed the door as she went out. Colbert remained modestly standing near that door. "What do you come to announce to me, monsieur?" said Louis, very much troubled at being thus apprised in his private thoughts, which he could not completely conceal. "That monsieur le cardinal has just expired, sire, and that I bring your majesty his last adieu." The king remained pensive for a minute, and during that minute he looked attentively at Colbert. It was evident that the cardinal's last words were in his mind. "Are you, then, M. Colbert?" asked he. "Yes, sire." "His faithful servant, as his eminence himself told me." "Yes, sire." "The depositary of many of his secrets." "Of all of them." The friends and servants of His Eminence will be dear to me, monsieur, and I shall take care that you are well placed in my employment. Colbert bowed. You are a financier, monsieur, I believe? Yes, sire. And did Monsieur le Cardinal employ you in his stewardship? I had that honor, sire. You never did anything personally for my household. I believe... Pardon me, sire. It was I who had the honor of giving Monsieur le Cardinal the idea of an economy which puts 300,000 francs a year into your Majesty's coffers. What economy was that, monsieur? Asked Louis XIV. Your Majesty knows that the 100 Swiss have silver lace on each side of their ribbons. Doubtless. Well, sire, it was I who proposed that imitation silver lace should be placed upon these ribbons. It could not be detected, and 100,000 crowns served to feed a regiment during 6 months, and is the price of 10,000 good muskets or the value of a vessel of 10 guns, ready for sea. That is true, said Louis XIV, considering more attentively, and ma avouai, that was a well-placed economy. Besides, it was ridiculous for soldiers to wear the same lace as noblemen. I am happy to be approved of by your Majesty. Is that the only appointment you held about the cardinal? Asked the king. It was I who was appointed to examine the accounts of the superintendent, sire. Ah, said Louis, who was about to dismiss Colbert, but whom that word stopped. Ah, it was you whom His Eminence had charged to control M. Fouquet, was it? And the result of the examination is that there's a deficit, sire, but if your Majesty will permit me. Speak, M. Colbert. I ought to give your Majesty some explanations. Not at all, monsieur. It is you who have controlled these accounts. Give me the result. That is very easily done, sire. Emptiness everywhere, money nowhere. Beware, monsieur. You are roughly attacking the administration of M. Fouquet, who, nevertheless, I have heard say, is an able man. Colbert colored, and then became pale, for he felt that from that minute he entered upon a struggle with a man whose power almost equaled the sway of him who had just died. Yes, sire, a very able man, repeated Colbert, bowing. But if M. Fouquet is an able man, and, in spite of that ability, if money be wanting, whose fault is it? I do not accuse, sire, I verify. That is well. Make out your accounts, and present them to me. There is a deficit, you say? A deficit may be temporary. Credit returns and funds are restored. No, sire. Upon this year, perhaps, I understand that, but upon next year. Next year is even as bare as the current year. But the year after, then, will be just like next year. What do you tell me, Monsieur Colbert? I say they are 4 years engaged beforehand. They must have a loan. Then, they must have 3. Sire, I will create offices to make them resign, and the salary of the post shall be paid into the treasury. Impossible, sire, for there have already been creations upon creations of offices, the provisions of which are given in blank, so that the purchasers enjoy them without filling them. That is why your Majesty cannot make them resign. Further, upon each agreement M. Fouquet has made an abatement of 1/3, so that the people have been plundered, without your Majesty profiting by it. Let your Majesty set down clearly your thought, and tell me what you wish me to explain. You are right. Clearness is what you wish, is it not? Yes, sire, clearness. God is God above all things, because He made light. Well, for example, resumed Louis XIV, if today, the cardinal being dead, and I being king, suppose I wanted money. Your Majesty would not have any. Oh, that is strange, monsieur. How? My superintendent would not find me any money. Colbert shook his large head. How is that? Said the king. Is the income of the state so much in debt that there is no longer any revenue? Yes, sire. The king started. Explain me that, M. Colbert, added he with a frown. If it be so, I will get together the ordonnances to obtain a discharge from the holders, a liquidation at a cheap rate. Impossible, For the ordonnances have been converted into bills, which bills, for the convenience of return and facility of transaction, are divided into so many parts that the originals can no longer be recognized. Louis, very much agitated, walked about, still frowning. But if this is as you say, Monsieur Colbert, said he, stopping all at once, I shall be ruined before I begin to reign. You err. In fact, sire, said the impassible cast-up of figures. Well, but yet, monsieur, the money is somewhere. Yes, sire, and even as a beginning, I bring your majesty a note of funds which M. le Cardinal Mazarin was not willing to set down in his testament, neither in any act whatever, but which he confided to me. To you? Yes, sire, with an injunction to remit it to your majesty. What? Besides the 40 millions of the testament? Yes, sire. M. de Mazarin had still other funds. Colbert bowed. Why, that man was a gulf, murmured the king. M. de Mazarin on one side, M. Fouquet on the other. More than 100 millions perhaps between them. No wonder my coffers should be empty. Colbert waited without stirring. And is the sum you bring me worth the trouble? Asked the king. Yes, sire, it is a round sum. Amounting to how much? To 13 millions of livres, sire. 13 millions, cried Louis, trembling with joy. Do you say 13 millions, Monsieur Colbert? I said 13 millions, yes, your majesty. Of which everybody is ignorant. Of which everybody is ignorant. Which are in your hands. In my hands, yes, sire. And which I can have. Within 2 hours, sire. But where are they, then? In the cellar of a house which the cardinal possessed in the city, and which he was so kind as to leave me by a particular clause of his will. You are acquainted with the cardinal's will. Then, I have a duplicate of it, signed by his hand. A duplicate? Yes, sire, and here it is. Colbert drew the deed quietly from his pocket and showed it to the king. The king read the article relative to the donation of the house. But, said he, there is no question here but of the house. There is nothing said of the money. Your pardon, sire, it is in my conscience. And Monsieur Mazarin has entrusted it to you. Why not, sire? He, a man mistrustful of everybody. He was not so of me, sire, as your majesty may perceive. Louis fixed his eyes with admiration upon that vulgar but expressive face. You are an honest man, M. Colbert, said the king. That is not a virtue, it is a duty, replied Colbert, coolly. But, added Louis, does not the money belong to the family? If this money belong to the family, it will be disposed of in the testament, as the rest of his fortune is. If this money belong to the family, I, who drew up the deed of donation in favor of your majesty, should have added the sum of 13 millions to that of 40 millions which was offered to you. How? Exclaimed Louis XIV. Was it you who drew up the deed of donation? Yes, sire. And yet the cardinal was attached to you, added the king ingenuously. I had assured his eminence you would by no means accept the gift, said Colbert in that same quiet manner we have described, and which, even in the common habits of life, had something solemn in it. Louis passed his hand over his brow. Oh, how young I am, murmured he, to have the command of men. Colbert waited the end of this monologue. He saw Louis raise his head. At what hour shall I send the money to your majesty? Asked he. Tonight, at 11 o'clock. I desire that no one may know that I possess this money. Colbert made no more reply than if the thing had not been said to him. Is the amount in ingots or coined gold? In coined gold, sire. That is well. Where shall I send it? To the Louvre. Thank you, M. Colbert. Colbert bowed and retired. 13 millions, exclaimed Louis, as soon as he was alone. This must be a dream. Then he allowed his head to sink between his hands, as if he were really asleep. But at the end of a moment he arose, And opening the window violently, he bathed his burning brow in the keen morning air, which brought to his senses the scent of the trees and the perfume of flowers. A splendid dawn was gilding the horizon, and the first rays of the sun bath inflamed the young king's brow. "This is the dawn of my reign," murmured Louis XIV. "It's a presage sent by the Almighty." Chapter 50. The first day of the royalty of Louis XIV. In the morning, the news of the death of the cardinal was spread through the castle, and then speedily reached the city. The ministers Fouquet, Léon, and Letelier entered La Salle des Sciences to hold a council. The king sent for them immediately. "Messieurs," said he, "as long as Monsieur le Cardinal lived, I allowed him to govern my affairs, but now I mean to govern them myself. You will give me your advice when I ask it. You may go." The ministers looked at each other with surprise. If they concealed a smile, it was with a great effort, for they knew that the prince, brought up in absolute ignorance of business, by this took upon himself a burden much too heavy for his strength. Fouquet took leave of his colleagues upon the stairs, saying, "Messieurs, there will be so much less labor for us." And he climbed gaily into his carriage. The others, a little uneasy at the turn things had taken, went back to Paris together. Towards 10 o'clock the king repaired to the apartment of his mother, with whom he had a long and private conversation. After dinner, he got into his carriage and went straight to the Louvre. They received much company, and took a degree of pleasure in remarking the hesitation of each and the curiosity of all. Towards evening he ordered the doors of the Louvre to be closed, with the exception of one only, which opened on the quay. He placed on duty at this point 200 Swiss, who did not speak a word of French, with orders to admit all who carried packages, but no others, and by no means to allow anyone to go out. At 11 o'clock precisely, he heard the rolling of a heavy carriage under the arch, then of another, then of a third, after which the gate grated upon its hinges to be closed. Soon after, somebody scratched with his nail at the door of the cabinet. The king opened it himself, and beheld Colbert, whose first word was this: "The money is in your Majesty's cellar." The king then descended and went himself to see the barrels of specie, in gold and silver, which, under the direction of Colbert, for men had just rolled into a cellar which the king had given Colbert the key in the morning. This review completed, Louis returned to his apartments, followed by Colbert, who had not apparently warmed with one ray of personal satisfaction. "Absolutely nothing, sire." "How nothing?" "Not even an opportunity of serving me." "If your Majesty were not to furnish me with that opportunity, I should not the less serve you. It is impossible for me not to be the best servant of the king." "You shall be intendant of the finances, M. Colbert." "But there is already a superintendent." "Sire." "I know that." "Sire, the superintendent of the finances is the most powerful man in the kingdom." "Ah!" cried Louis, culling, "do you think so?" "He will crush me in a week." "Sire, your Majesty gives me a control for which strength is indispensable. An intendant under a superintendent, that is inferiority. You want support, you do not reckon upon me. I had the honor of telling your Majesty that during the lifetime of M. de Mazarin, M. Fouquet was the second man in the kingdom. Now M. de Mazarin is dead, M. Fouquet has become the first. Monsieur, I agree to what you told me of all things up to today, but tomorrow, please to remember, I shall no longer suffer it. Then I shall be of no use to your Majesty. You are already, since you fear to compromise yourself in serving me. I only fear to be placed so that I cannot serve your Majesty. What do you wish? Then, I wish your Majesty to allow me assistance in the labors of the office of intendant. The post would lose its value. It would gain in security. Choose your colleagues. Messrs. Brettel, Morin, Harvard. Tomorrow the ordinance shall appear. Sire, I thank you. Is that all you ask? No, sire, one thing more. What is that? Allow me to compose a chamber of justice. What would this chamber of justice do? Try the farmers general and contractors who, during 10 years, have been robbing the state. Well, but what would you do with them? Hang 2 or 3, and that would make the rest disgorge. I cannot commence my reign with executions, Monsieur Colbert. On the contrary, sire, you had better, in order not to have to end with them. The king made no reply. Does your majesty consent? Said Colbert. I will reflect upon it, monsieur. It will be too late when reflection may be made. Why? Because you have to deal with people stronger than ourselves, if they are warned. Compose that chamber of justice, monsieur. I will, sire. Is that all? No, sire, there is still another important affair. What rights does your majesty attach to this office of intendant? Well, I do not know, the customary ones. Sire, I desire that this office be invested with the right of reading the correspondence with England. Impossible, monsieur, for that correspondence is kept from the council. Monsieur le Cardinal himself carried it on. I thought your majesty had this morning declared that there should no longer be a council. Yes, I said so. Let your majesty then have the goodness to read all the letters yourself, particularly those from England. I hold strongly to this article. Monsieur, you shall have that correspondence, and render me an account of it. Now, sire, what shall I do with respect to the finances? Everything M. Fouquet has not done. That is all I ask of your majesty. Thanks, sire, I depart in peace. And at these words he took his leave. Louis watched his departure. Colbert was not yet 100 paces from the Louvre when the king received a courier from England. After having looked at and examined the envelope, the king broke the seal precipitately and found a letter from Charles II. The following is what the English prince wrote to his royal brother. Your majesty must be rendered very uneasy by the illness of M. le Cardinal Mazarin, but the excess of danger can only prove of service to you. The cardinal is given over by his physician. I thank you for the gracious reply you have made to my communication touching the Princess Henrietta, my sister, and, in a week, the princess and her court will set out for Paris. It is gratifying to me to acknowledge the fraternal friendship you have evinced towards me, and to call you, more justly than ever, my brother. It is gratifying to me, above everything, to prove to your majesty how much I am interested in all that may please you. You are having Belle-Île-Mer secretly fortified. That is wrong. We shall never be at war against each other. That measure does not make me uneasy. It makes me sad. You are spending useless millions. Tell your minister so, and rest assured that I am well informed. Render me the same service, my brother, if occasion offers. The king rang his bell violently, and his valet de chambre appeared. Monsieur Colbert is just gone. He cannot be far off. Let him be called back, exclaimed he. The valet was about to execute the order, when the king stopped him. No, said he, no, I see the whole scheme of that man. Belle-Isle belongs to M. Fouquet. Belle-Isle is being fortified. There's a conspiracy on the part of M. Fouquet. The discovery of that conspiracy is the ruin of the superintendent, and that discovery is the result of the correspondence with England. This is why Colbert wished to have that correspondence. Oh, but I cannot place all my dependence upon that man. He has a good head, but I must have an arm. Louis, all at once, uttered a joyful cry. I had, said he, a lieutenant of musketeers. Yes, sire, Monsieur d'Artagnan. He quitted the service for a time. Yes, sire. Let him be found, and be here tomorrow the first thing in the morning. The valet de chambre bowed and went out. 13 millions in my cellar, said the king. Colbert carry my purse and D'Artagnan my sword. I am king. Chapter 51. A Passion. The day of his arrival, on returning from the Palais Royal, Athos, as we have seen, went straight to his hotel in the Rue Saint-Honore. He there found the Vicomte de Bragelonne waiting for him in his chamber, chatting with Grimaud. It was not an easy thing to talk with this old servant. Two men only possessed the secret, Athos and D'Artagnan. The first succeeded, because Grimaud sought to make him speak himself. D'Artagnan, on the contrary, because he knew how to make Grimaud talk. Raoul was occupied in making him describe the voyage to England, and Grimaud had related it in all its details, with a limited number of gestures and 8 words. neither more nor less. He had, at first, indicated by an undulating movement of his hand that his master and he had crossed the sea. Upon some expedition? Raoul had asked. Grimaud, by bending down his head, had answered, yes. When Monsieur le Comte incurred much danger, asked Raoul, neither too much nor too little, was replied by a shrug of the shoulders. But, still, what sort of danger? Insisted Raoul. Grimaud pointed to the sword. He pointed to the fire and to a musket that was hanging on the wall. Monsieur le Comte had an enemy there. Then, cried Raoul. Monk, replied Grimaud. It is strange, continued Raoul, that Monsieur le Comte persists in considering me a novice and not allowing me to partake the honor and danger of his adventure. Grimaud smiled. It was at this moment Athos came in. The host was lighting him up the stays, and Grimaud, recognizing the step of his master, hastened to meet him, which cut short the conversation. But Raoul was launched on the sea of interrogatories, and did not stop, taking both hands of the Comte, with warm but respectful tenderness. How is it, monsieur, said he, that you have set out upon a dangerous voyage without bidding me adieu, without commanding the aid of my sword, of myself, who ought to be your support? Now I have the strength, whom you have brought up like a man. Ah, monsieur, can you expose me to the cruel trial of never seeing you again? Who told you, Raoul, said the Comte, placing his cloak and hat in the hands of Grimaud, who had unbuckled his sword. Who told you that my voyage was a dangerous one? I, said Grimaud. And why did you do so? Said Athos, sternly. Grimaud was embarrassed. Raoul came to his assistance, by answering for him. It is natural, monsieur, that our good Grimaud should tell me the truth in what concerns you. By whom should you be loved and supported, if not by me? Athos did not reply. He made a friendly motion to Grimaud, which sent him out of the room. He then seated himself in a fauteuil, whilst Raoul remained standing before him. But is it true, continued Raoul, that your voyage was an expedition, and that steel and fire threatened you? Say no more about that, Vicomte, said Athos mildly. I set out hastily, it is true, but the service of King Charles II required a prompt departure. As to your anxiety, I thank you for it, and I know that I can depend upon you. You have not wanted for anything, Vicomte, in my absence, have you? No, monsieur, thank you. I left orders with Blaisois to pay you 100 pistoles, if you should stand in need of money. Monsieur, I have not seen Blaisois. You have been without money. Then, monsieur, I had 30 pistoles left from the sale of the horses I took in my last campaign, and M. le Prince had the kindness to allow me to win 200 pistoles at his play table 3 months ago. Do you play? I don't like that, Raoul. I never play, monsieur. It was M. le Prince who ordered me to hold his cards at Chantilly, one night when a courier came to him from the king. I won, and M. le Prince commanded me to take the stakes. Is that a practice in the household? Raoul asked Athos with a frown. Yes, monsieur. Every week M. le Prince affords, upon one occasion or another, a similar advantage to one of his gentlemen. There are 50 gentlemen in his highness's household. It was my turn. Very well. You went into Spain. Then? Yes, monsieur. I made a very delightful and interesting journey. You have been back a month. Have you not? Yes, monsieur. And in the course of that month? In that month. What have you done? My duty, monsieur. Have you not been home to La Fère? Raoul colored. Athos looked at him with a fixed but tranquil expression. You would be wrong not to believe me, said Raoul. I feel that I colored, and in spite of myself. The question you did me the honor to ask me is of a nature to raise in me much emotion. I color, then, because I'm agitated, not because I meditate a falsehood. I know, Raoul, you never lie. No, monsieur. Besides, my young friend, you would be wrong. What I wanted to say. I know quite well, monsieur. You would ask me if I have not been to Blois. Exactly so. I have not been there. I have not even seen the person to whom you allude. Raoul's voice trembled as he pronounced these words. Athos, a sovereign judge in all matters of delicacy, immediately added, Raoul, you answer with a painful feeling. You are unhappy. Very, monsieur. You have forbidden me to go to Blois, or to see Mademoiselle de la Valliere again. Here the young man stopped. That dear name, so delightful to pronounce, made his heart bleed, although so sweet upon his lips. And I have acted rightly, Raoul. Athos hastened to reply. I am neither an unjust nor barbarous father. I respect true love, but I look forward for you to a future, an immense future. A new reign is about to break upon us like a fresh dawn. War calls upon a young king full of chivalric spirit. What is wanting to assist this heroic ardor is a battalion of young and free lieutenants who would rush to the fight with enthusiasm and fall, crying, Vive le roi, instead of Adieu, my dear wife. You understand that, Raoul, however brutal my reasoning may appear, I conjure you, then, to believe me, and to turn away your thoughts from those early days of youth in which you took up this habit of love, days of effeminate carelessness, which softened the heart and rendered incapable of consuming those strong, bitter draughts called glory and adversity. Therefore, Raoul, I repeat to you, you should see in my counsel only the desire of being useful to you, only the ambition of seeing you prosper. I believe you capable of becoming a remarkable man. March alone, and you will march better and more quickly. You have commanded, monsieur, replied Raoul, and I obey. Commanded, cried Athos. Is it thus you reply to me? I have commanded you. Oh, you distort my words as you misconceive my intentions. I do not command you, I request you. No, monsieur, you have commanded, said Raoul persistently. Had you only requested me, your request is even more effective than your order. I have not seen Mademoiselle de la Valliere again. But you are unhappy. You are unhappy, insisted Athos. Raoul made no reply. I find you pale. I find you dull. The sentiment is strong. Then, it is a passion, replied Raoul. No, a habit. Monsieur, you know I have traveled much, that I have passed 2 years far away from her. A habit would yield to an absence of 2 years, I believe, whereas, on my return, I loved, not more, that was impossible, but as much. Mademoiselle de la Valliere is for me the one lady above all others, but you are for me a god upon earth. To you I sacrifice everything. You are wrong, said Athos. I have no longer any right over you. Age has emancipated you. You no longer even stand in need of my consent. Besides, I will not refuse my consent after what you have told me. Marry Mademoiselle de la Valliere, if you like. Raoul was startled, but suddenly, You are very kind, monsieur, said he, and your concession excites my warmest gratitude, but I will not accept it. Then you now refuse. Yes, monsieur. I will not oppose you in anything, Raoul. That is true. That is sufficient to make me resist. I will wait. Beware, Raoul. What you are now saying is serious. I know it is, monsieur. As I said, I will wait. Until I die, said Athos, much agitated. Oh, monsieur, cried Raoul, with tears in his eyes, is it possible that you should wound my heart thus? I have never given you cause of complaint. Dear boy, that is true, murmured Athos, pressing his lips violently together to conceal the emotion of which he was no longer master. No, I will no longer afflict you, only I do not comprehend what you mean by waiting. Will you wait till you love no longer? Ah, for that, no, monsieur. I will wait till you change your opinion. I should wish to put the matter to a test. Raoul, I should like to see if Mademoiselle de la Valliere will wait as you do. I hope so, monsieur. But take care, Raoul. Suppose she did not wait? Ah, you are so young, so confiding, so loyal. Women are changeable. You have never spoken ill to me of women, monsieur. You have never had to complain of them. Why should you doubt of Mademoiselle de la Valliere? That is true, said Athos, casting down his eyes. I have never spoken ill to you of women. I have never had a complaint of them. Mademoiselle de la Valliere never gave birth to suspicion. But when we are looking forward, we must go even to exceptions, even to improbabilities. If, I say, Mademoiselle de la Valliere should not wait for you. How, monsieur? If she turned her eyes another way. If she looked favorably upon another, do you mean, monsieur? Said Raoul, pale with agony. Exactly. Well, monsieur, I would kill him, said Raoul, simply, and all the men whom Mademoiselle de la Valliere should choose, until one of them had killed me, or Mademoiselle de la Valliere had restored me her heart. Athos started. I thought, resumed he, in an agitated voice, that you called me just now your God, your law in this world. Oh, said Raoul, trembling, you would forbid me the duel. Suppose I did forbid it, Raoul? You would forbid me to hope, monsieur. Consequently, you would not forbid me to die. Athos raised his eyes toward the Vicomte. He had pronounced these words with the most melancholy inflection, accompanied by the most melancholy look. Enough, said Athos, after a long silence. Enough of this subject, upon which we both go too far. Live as well as you are able, Raoul, perform your duties. Love Mademoiselle de la Valliere. In a word, act like a man, since you have attained the age of a man. Only do not forget that I love you tenderly, and that you profess to love me. Ah, Monsieur le Comte, cried Raoul, pressing the hand of Athos to his heart. Enough. Dear boy, leave me. I want rest. Apropos, M. d'Artagnan has returned from England with me. You owe him a visit. I will pay it, monsieur, with great pleasure. I love Monsieur d'Artagnan exceedingly. You are right in doing so. He is a worthy man and a brave cavalier, who loves you dearly. I am sure of that. Do you know his address? At the Louvre, I suppose, or wherever the king is. Does he not command the Musketeers? No. At present M. d'Artagnan is absent on leave. He is resting for a while. Do not, therefore, seek him at the post of his service. You will hear of him at the house of a certain Planchet. His former lackey, exactly, turned grocer. I know, Rue des Lombards. Somewhere thereabouts, or Rue des Asses. I will find it, monsieur, I will find it. You will say 1,000 kind things to him, on my part, and ask him to come and dine with me before I set out for La Fère. Yes, monsieur. Good night, Raoul. Monsieur, I see you wear an order I never saw you wear before. Accept my compliments. The fleece, that is true. A bauble, my boy, which no longer amuses an old child like myself. Good night, Raoul. Chapter 52. D'Artagnan's Lesson. Raoul did not meet with D'Artagnan the next day, as he had hoped. He only met with Planchet, whose joy was great at seeing the young man again, and who contrived to pay him 2 or 3 little soldierly compliments, savoring very little of the grocer's shop. But as Raoul was returning the next day from Vincennes, at the head of 50 dragoons confided to him by Monsieur le Prince, he perceived, in La Place Baudoyer, a man with his nose in the A, examining a house as we examine a horse we have a fancy to buy. This man, dressed in citizen costume buttoned up like a military pourpoint, a very small hat on his head, but a long shagreen-mounted sword by his side, turned his head as soon as he heard the steps of the horses, and left off looking at the house to look at the dragoons. It was simply M. d'Artagnan, D'Artagnan on foot, D'Artagnan with his hands behind him, passing a little review upon the dragoons, after having reviewed the buildings. Not a man, not a tag, not a horses who've escaped his inspection. Raoul rode at the side of his troop. D'Artagnan perceived him the last. "Eh," said he, "eh? More to you." "I was not mistaken," cried Raoul, turning his horse towards him. "Mistaken? No. Good day to you," replied the ex-musketeer, whilst Raoul eagerly pressed the hand of his old friend. "Take care, Raoul," said D'Artagnan. "The second horse of the 5th rank will lose a shoe before he gets to the Pont Marie. He has only 2 nails left in his off forefoot. Wait a minute. I will come back, said Raoul. Can you quit your detachment? The cornet is there to take my place. Then you will come and dine with me. Most willingly, Monsieur d'Artagnan. Be quick, then leave your horse, or make them give me one. I prefer coming back on foot with you. Raoul hastened to give notice to the cornet, who took his post. He then dismounted, gave his horse to one of the dragoons, and with great delight seized the arm of M. d'Artagnan, who had watched him during all these little evolutions with the satisfaction of a connoisseur. "What, do you come from Vincennes?" said he. "Yes, Monsieur le Chevalier." "And the cardinal is very ill. It is even reported he is dead." "Are you on good terms with M. Fouquet?" asked D'Artagnan, with a disdainful movement of the shoulders, proving that the death of Mazarin did not affect him beyond measure. "With M. Fouquet?" said Raoul. "I do not know him." "So much the worse. So much the worse. For a new king always seeks to get good men in his employment." "Oh, the king means no harm," replied the young man. "I say nothing about the crown," cried D'Artagnan. "I am speaking of the king that is M. Fouquet. If the cardinal is dead, you must contrive to stand well with M. Fouquet, if you do not wish to moulder away all your life as I have mouldered. It is true you have, fortunately, other protectors. M. le Prince, for instance. Worn out. M. le Comte de la Fere. Athos. Oh, that's different. Yes, Athos. And if you have any wish to make your way in England, you cannot apply to a better person. I can even say, without too much vanity, that I myself have some credit at the court of Charles II. There's a king. God speed him." "Ah!" cried Raoul, with the natural curiosity of well-born young people, while listening to experience and courage. "Yes, a king who amuses himself, it is true, but who has had a sword in his hand and can appreciate useful men. Athos is on good terms with Charles II. Take service there, and leave these scoundrels of contractors and farmers general, who steal as well with French hands as others have done with Italian hands. Leave the little sniveling king, who is going to give us another reign of Francis II. Do you know anything of history, Raoul?" "Yes, Monsieur le Chevalier." "Do you know, then, that Francis II had always the earache?" "No, I did not know that." "That Charles IV had always the headache?" "Indeed." "And Henry III always the stomachache?" Raoul began to laugh. "Well, my dear friend, Louis XIV always has a heartache. It is deplorable to see a king sighing from morning till night, without saying once in course of the day, 'Ventre Saint Gris,' 'Corbeuf,' or anything to rouse one. Was that the reason why you quitted the service, Monsieur le Chevalier?" "Yes." "But you yourself, M. d'Artagnan, are throwing the handle after the axe. You will not make a fortune." "Who? I?" replied D'Artagnan, in a careless tone. "I am settled. I had some family property." Raoul looked at him. The poverty of D'Artagnan was proverbial. A Gascon, he exceeded in ill luck all the Gasconades of France and Navarre. Raoul had 100 times heard Job and D'Artagnan named together, as the twins Romulus and Remus. D'Artagnan caught Raoul's look of astonishment. "And has not your father told you I have been in England?" "Yes, Monsieur le Chevalier." "And that I there met with a very lucky chance." "No, monsieur, I did not know that." "Yes, a very worthy friend of mine, a great nobleman, the Viceroy of Scotland and Ireland, has endowed me with an inheritance." "An inheritance? And a good one, too. Then you are rich." "Bah!" "Receive my sincere congratulation." "Thank you. Look, that is my house." "Place to grieve?" "Yes. Don't you like this quarter?" "On the contrary, the lookout over the water is pleasant." "Oh, what a pretty old house." "The sign Notre Dame. It is an old cabaret, which I have transformed into a private house in 2 days." "But the cabaret is still open." Pardieu. And where do you lodge? Then, I lodge with Planchet. You said, just now, this is my house. I said so, because, in fact, it is my house. I have bought it. Ah, said Raoul. At 10 years' purchase, my dear Raoul, a superb affair, I bought the house for 30,000 livres. It is a garden which opens to the Rue de la Martillerie. The cabaret lets for 1,000 livres, with the first story. The garret, or second floor, for 500 livres. Indeed? Yes, indeed. 500 livres for a garret? Why, it is not habitable. Therefore no one inhabits it. Only, you see, this garret has 2 windows which look out upon the place. Yes, monsieur. Well, then, every time any body is broken on the wheel or hung, quartered, or burnt, these 2 windows let for 20 pistoles. Oh, said Raoul with horror. It is disgusting. Is it not? Said D'Artagnan. Oh, repeated Raoul. It is disgusting. But so it is. These Parisian cockneys are sometimes real anthropophagi. I cannot conceive how men, Christians, can make such speculations. That is true. As for myself, continued D'Artagnan, if I inhabited the house on days of execution, I would shut it up to the very keyholes, but I do not inhabit it. And you let the garret for 500 livres. To the ferocious cabaretier, who sublets it, I said, then 1,500 livres. The natural interest of money, said Raoul, 5%. Exactly so. I then have left the side of the house at the back, storerooms, and cellars, inundated every winter, 200 livres, and the garden, which is very fine, well planted, well shaded under the walls and the portal of Saint Gervais Saint Prode, 1,300 livres. 1,300 livres. Why, that is royal. This is the whole history. I strongly suspect some canon of the parish. These canons are all as rich as Croesus. I suspect some canon of having hired the garden to take his pleasure in. The tenant has given the name of M. Goddard. That is either a false name or a real name. If true, he is a canon. If false, he is some unknown. But of what consequence is it to me? He always pays in advance. I had also an idea just now, when I met you, of buying a house in the Place Bourdais, the back premises of which join my garden, and would make a magnificent property. Your dragoons interrupted my calculations. But come, let us take the Rue de la Vannerie, that will lead us straight to M. Planchet's. D'Artagnan mended his pace, and conducted Raoul to Planchet's dwelling, a chamber which the grocer had given up to his old master. Planchet was out, but the dinner was ready. There was a remains of military regularity and punctuality preserved in the grocer's household. D'Artagnan returned to the subject of Raoul's future. Your father brings you up rather strictly, said he. Justly, Monsieur le Chevalier. Oh, yes, I know Athos is just, but close, perhaps. A royal hand, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Well, never want, my boy. If ever you stand in need of a few pistoles, the old musketeer is at hand. My dear Monsieur D'Artagnan, do you play a little? Never. Successful with the ladies. Then, oh, my little Aramis, that, my dear friend, costs even more than play. It is true we fight when we lose. That is a compensation. Ah, that little sniveler, the king, makes winners give him his revenge. What a reign! My poor Raoul, what a reign! When we think that, in my time, the musketeers will besiege in their houses like Hector and Priam in the city of Troy, and the women wept, and then the walls laughed, and then 500 beggarly fellows clapped their hands, and cried, "Kill, kill," when not one musketeer was hurt. More to you, you will never see anything like that. You are very hard upon the king, my dear Monsieur D'Artagnan, and yet you scarcely know him. Listen, Raoul. Day by day, hour by hour, take note of my words. I will predict what he will do. The cardinal being dead, he will fret. Very well. That is the least silly thing he will do, particularly if he does not shed a tear. And then, Why, then he will get Emphaker to allow him a pension, and will go and compose verses at Fontainebleau upon some Mancini or other, whose eyes the queen will scratch out. She is a Spaniard, you see, this queen of ours, and she has, for mother-in-law, Madame Anne of Austria. I know something of the Spaniards of the House of Austria. And next, well, after having torn off the silver lace from the uniforms of his Swiss, because lace is too expensive, he will dismount the Musketeers, because the oats and hay of a horse cost 5 sols a day. Oh, do not say that. Of what consequence is it to me? I am no longer a musketeer, am I? Let them be on horseback, let them be on foot, let them carry a larding pin, a spit, a sword, or nothing. What is it to me? My dear Monsieur d'Artagnan, I beseech you speak no more ill of the king. I am almost in his service, and my father would be very angry with me for having heard, even from your mouth, words injurious to his majesty. Your father, eh? He is a knight in every bad cause. Pardieu, yes, your father is a brave man, a Caesar, it is true, but a man without perception. Now, my dear Chevalier, exclaimed Raoul, laughing, are you going to speak ill of my father, of him you call the great Athos? Truly you are in a bad vein today. Riches render you as sour as poverty renders other people. Pardieu, you are right. I am a rascal and in my dotage. I am an unhappy wretch grown old, a tencord untwisted, a pierced cuirass, a boot without a sole, a spur without a rowel. But do me the pleasure to add one thing. What is that, my dear Monsieur d'Artagnan? Simply say, Mazarin was a pitiful wretch. Perhaps he is dead. More the reason, I say was, if I did not hope that he was dead, I would entreat you to say, Mazarin is a pitiful wretch. Come, say so, for love of me. Well, I will. Say it. Mazarin was a pitiful wretch, said Raoul, smiling at the musketeer, who roared with laughter as in his best days. A moment, said the latter. You have spoken my first proposition. Here is the conclusion of it. Repeat, Raoul, repeat. But I regret Mazarin. Chevalier, you will not say it? Well, then, I will say it twice for you. But you would regret Mazarin. And they were still laughing and discussing the profession of principals, when one of the shop boys entered. A letter, monsieur, said he, for M. d'Artagnan. Thank you. Give it me, cried the musketeer. The handwriting of Monsieur le Comte, said Raoul. Yes, yes. And D'Artagnan broke the seal. Dear friend, said Athos, a person has just been here to beg me to seek for you on the part of the king. Seek me, said D'Artagnan, letting the paper fall upon the table. Raoul picked it up and continued to read aloud. Make haste. His Majesty is very anxious to speak to you, and expects you at the Louvre. Expects me, again repeated the musketeer. He, laughed Raoul. Oh, replied D'Artagnan. What the devil can this mean? Chapter 53. The King. The first moment of surprise over, D'Artagnan repressed Athos's note. It is strange, said he, that the king should send for me. Why so? Said Raoul. Do you not think, monsieur, that the king must regret such a servant as you? Oh, cried the officer, laughing with all his might. You are poking fun at me, Master Raoul. If the king had regretted me, he would not have let me leave him. No, I see in it something better, or worse, if you like. Worse? What can that be, Monsieur le Chevalier? You are young, you are a boy, you are admirable. Oh, how I should like to be as you are, to be but 24, with an unfurrowed brow, under which the brain is void of everything but women, love, and good intentions. Oh, Raoul, as long as you have not received the smiles of kings, the confidence of queens, as long as you have not had 2 cardinals killed under you, the one a tiger, the other a fox, as long as you have not. But what is the good of all this trifling? We must part, Raoul. How you say the word? What a serious face. Hey, but the occasion is worthy of it. Listen to me. I have a very good recommendation to tender you. I am all attention, Monsieur d'Artagnan. You will go and inform your father of my departure. Your departure. Pardieu, you will tell him that I am gone into England, and that I am living in my little country house. In England, you, and the king's orders. You get more and more silly. Do you imagine that I am going to the Louvre to place myself at the disposal of that little crowned wolf cub? The king of wolf cub? Why, Monsieur le Chevalier, you are mad. On the contrary, I never was so sane. You do not know what he wants to do with me, this worthy son of Louis le Justa. But more do you, that is policy. He wishes to ensconce me snugly in the Bastille, purely and simply. Look you. What for? Cried Raoul, terrified at what he heard. On account of what I told him one day at Blois. I was warm. He remembers it. You told him what? That he was mean, cowardly, and silly. Good God, cried Raoul. Is it possible that such words should have issued from your mouth? Perhaps I don't give the letter of my speech, but I give the sense of it. But did not the king have you arrested immediately? By whom? It was I who commanded the Musketeers. He must have commanded me to convey myself to prison. I would never have consented. I would have resisted myself. And then I went into England, no more D'Artagnan. Now, the cardinal is dead, or nearly so. They learn that I am in Paris, and they lay their hands on me. The cardinal was your protector. The cardinal knew me. He knew certain particularities of me. I also knew some of his. We appreciated each other mutually. And then, on rendering his soul to the devil, he would recommend an of Austria to make me the inhabitant of a safe place. Go then, and find your father, relate the fact to him, and adieu. My dear Monsieur d'Artagnan, said Raoul, very much agitated, after having looked out at the window, you cannot even fly. Why not? Because there is below an officer of the Swiss Guards waiting for you. Well, he will arrest you. D'Artagnan broke into a Homeric laugh. Oh, I know very well that you will resist, that you will fight, even. I know very well that you will prove the conqueror, but that amounts to rebellion, and you are an officer yourself, knowing what discipline is. Devil of a boy, how logical that is, grumbled D'Artagnan. You approve of it, do you not? Yes. Instead of passing into the street, where the idiot is waiting for me, I will slip quietly out at the back. I have a horse in the stable, and a good one. I will ride him to death. My means permit me to do so, and by killing one horse after another, I shall arrive at Boulogne in 11 hours. I know the road. Only tell your father one thing. What is that? That is, that the thing he knows about is placed at Planchet's house, except the fifth, and that... But, my damn d'Artagnan, rest assured that if you fly, 2 things will be said of you. What are they, my dear friend? The first, that you are being afraid. Ah, and who will dare to say that? The king first. Well, but he will tell the truth. I am afraid. The second, that you knew yourself guilty. Guilty of what? Why, of the crimes they wish to impute to you. That is true again. So, then, you advise me to go and get myself made a prisoner in the Bastille. M. le Comte de la Fée would advise you just as I do. Pardieu, I know he would, said D'Artagnan thoughtfully. You are right. I shall not escape. But if they cast me into the Bastille... We will get you out again, said Raoul with a quiet, calm air. More to you. You said that after a brave fashion, Raoul, said D'Artagnan, seizing his hand, that savours of Athos distinctly. Well, I will go. Then, do not forget my last word. Except the fifth, said Raoul. Yes, you are a fine boy, and I wish you to add one thing to that last word. Speak, Chevalier. It is that if you cannot get me out of the Bastille, and I remain there, oh, That will be so, and I shall be a detestable prisoner. I, who have been a possible man. In that case, I give 3/5 to you, and the 4th to your father. Chevalier, more to you. If you will have some masses said for me, you are welcome. That being said, D'Artagnan took his belt from the hook, girded on his sword, took a hat the feather of which was fresh, and held his hand out to Raoul, who threw himself into his arms. When in the shop, he cast a quick glance at the shop lads, who looked upon the scene with a pride mingled with some inquietude. Then, plunging his hands into a chest of currants, he went straight to the officer who was waiting for him at the door. Those features! Can it be you, Monsieur de Friedisch? Cried D'Artagnan gaily. Hey! Hey! What? Do we arrest our friends? Arrest? Whispered the lads among themselves. Yes, it is I, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Good day to you, said the Swiss, in his mountain patois. Must I give you up my sword? I warn you that it is long and heavy. You had better let me wear it to the Louvre. I feel quite lost in the streets without a sword, and you would be more to lost than I should with two. The king has given no orders about it, replied the Swiss, so keep your sword. Well, that is very polite on the part of the king. Let us go at once. Monsieur Friedisch was not a talker, and D'Artagnan had too many things to think about to say much. From Planchet's shop to the Louvre was not far. They arrived in 10 minutes. It was a dark night. M. de Friedisch wanted to enter by the wicket. No, said D'Artagnan, you would lose time by that. Take the little staircase. The Swiss did as D'Artagnan advised, and conducted him to the vestibule of the king's cabinet. When arrived there, he bowed to his prisoner, and, without saying anything, returned to his post. D'Artagnan had not had time to ask why his sword was not taken from him, when the door of the cabinet opened, and a valet de chamber called M. D'Artagnan. The musketeer assumed his parade carriage and entered, with his large eyes wide open, his brow calm, his mustache stiff. The king was seated at a table writing. He did not disturb himself when the step of the musketeer resounded on the floor. He did not even turn his head. D'Artagnan advanced as far as the middle of the room, and seeing that the king paid no attention to him, and suspecting, besides, that this was nothing but affectation, a sort of tormenting preamble to the explanation that was preparing, he turned his back on the prince, and began to examine the frescoes on the cornices and the cracks in the ceiling. This maneuver was accompanied by a little tacit monologue. Ah, you want to humble me, do you? You, whom I have seen so young. You, whom I have served as I would my own child. You, whom I have served as I would a god, that is to say, for nothing. Wait a while. Wait a while. You shall see what a man can do as snuff the air of the fire of the Huguenots, under the beard of Monsieur le Cardinal, the true cardinal. At this moment Louis turned round. Ah, are you there, Monsieur D'Artagnan? Said he. D'Artagnan saw the movement and imitated it. Yes, sire, said he. Very well. Have the goodness to wait till I have cast this up. D'Artagnan made no reply. He only bowed. That is polite enough, thought he. I have nothing to say. Louis made a violent dash with his pen and threw it angrily away. Ah, go on. Work yourself up, thought the musketeer. You will put me at my ease. You shall find I did not empty the bag the other day at Bois. Louis rose from his seat, passed his hand over his brow. Then, stopping opposite to D'Artagnan, he looked at him with an air at once imperious and kind. What the devil does he want with me? I wish he would begin, thought the musketeer. Monsieur, said the king, you know, without doubt, that Monsieur le Cardinal is dead. I suspected so, sire. You know that, consequently, I am master in my own kingdom. That is not a thing that dates from the death of Monsieur le Cardinal. Sire, a man is always master in his own house, when he wishes to be so. Yes, but do you remember all you said to me at Bois? Now we come to it, thought D'Artagnan. I was not deceived. Well, so much the better. It is a sign that my scent is tolerably keen yet. You do not answer me, said Louis. Sire, I think I recollect. You only think. It is so long ago. If you do not remember, I do. You said to me, listen with attention. Ah, I shall listen with all my ears, sire, for it is very likely the conversation will turn in a fashion very interesting to me. Louis once more looked at the musketeer. The latter smoothed the feather of his hat, then his mustache, and waited bravely. Louis XIV continued, You quitted my service, monsieur, after having told me the whole truth. Yes, sire. That is, after having declared to me all you thought to be true with regard to my mode of thinking and acting. That is always a merit. You began by telling me that you had served my family 30 years and were fatigued. I said so, yes, sire, and you afterwards admitted that fatigue was a pretext and that discontent was the real cause. I was discontented, in fact, but that discontent has never betrayed itself, that I know of, and if, like a man of heart, I have spoken out before your majesty, I have not even thought of the matter before anybody else. Do not excuse yourself, D'Artagnan, but continue to listen to me. When making me the reproach that you were discontented, you received in reply a promise. Wait. Is not that true? Yes, sire, as true as what I told you. You answered me, hereafter, no, now, immediately. Do not excuse yourself, I tell you. It was natural, but you had no charity for your poor prince, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Sire, charity for a king on the part of a poor soldier. You understand me very well. You knew that I stood in need of it. You knew very well that I was not master. You knew very well that my hope was in the future. Now, you answer me when I spoke of that future, my discharge, and that directly. That is true, murmured D'Artagnan, biting his mustache. You did not flatter me when I was in distress, added Louis. But, said D'Artagnan, raising his head nobly, if I did not flatter your majesty when poor, neither did I betray you. I have shed my blood for nothing. I have watched like a dog at a door, knowing full well that neither bread nor bone would be thrown to me. I, although poor likewise, ask nothing of your majesty but the discharge you speak of. I know you are a brave man, but I was a young man, and you ought to have had some indulgence for me. What had you to reproach the king with? That he left King Charles II without assistance, let us say further, that he did not marry Mademoiselle de Mancini. When saying these words, the king fixed upon the musketeer a searching look. Ah, thought the latter, he is doing far more than remembering. He divines. The devil. Your sentence, continued Louis, fell upon the king and fell upon the man. But, Monsieur D'Artagnan, that weakness, for you considered it a weakness. D'Artagnan made no reply. You reproach me also with regard to Monsieur, the defunct cardinal. Now, Monsieur le Cardinal, did he not bring me up? Did he not support me? Elevating himself and supporting himself at the same time, I admit, but the benefit was discharged. As an ingrate or an egotist, would you, then, have better loved or served me? Sire, we will say no more about it, monsieur. It would only create in you too many regrets and me too much pain. D'Artagnan was not convinced. The young king, in adopting a tone of hauteur with him, did not forward his purpose. You have since reflected, resumed Louis. Upon what, sire? Asked D'Artagnan, politely. Why, upon all that I have said to you, monsieur. Yes, sire, no doubt. And you have only waited for an opportunity of retracting your words. Sire. Oh, nothing, sire. This is no business of mine. The king had already taken up the pen and was applying it to the paper. Sire, said Colbert in a subdued voice, I beg to warn your majesty that if an example be necessary, there will be difficulty in the execution of your orders. What do you say? Said Louis. You must not conceal from yourself, continued Colbert quietly, that attacking the farmers general is attacking the superintendents. The two unfortunate guilty men in question are the particular friends of a powerful personage, and the punishment, which otherwise might be comfortably confined to the shadowlet, will doubtless be a signal for disturbances. Louis colored and turned towards D'Artagnan, who took a slight bite at his mustache, not without a smile of pity for the financier, and for the king who had to listen to him so long. But Louis seized a pen, and with a movement so rapid that his hand shook, he affixed his signature at the bottom of the two papers presented by Colbert. Then looking the latter in the face, "Monsieur Colbert," said he, "when you speak to me on business, exclude more frequently the word difficulty from your reasonings and opinions. As to the word impossibility, never pronounce it." Colbert bowed, much humiliated at having to undergo such a lesson before the musketeer. He was about to go out, but, jealous to repair his check, "I forgot to announce to your majesty," said he, "that the confiscations amount to the sum of 5 millions of livres." "That's pretty well," thought D'Artagnan. "Which makes in my coffers," said the king, 18 millions of livres. "Sire," replied Colbert, bowing. "Mordieu," growled D'Artagnan, "that's glorious." "Monsieur Colbert," added the king, "you will, if you please, go through the gallery where M. Léon is waiting, and will tell him to bring hither what he has drawn up by my order." "Directly, sire, if your majesty wants me no more this evening." "No, monsieur, good night." And Colbert went out. "Now, let us return to our affair, M. D'Artagnan," said the king, as if nothing had happened. "You see that, with respect to money, there is already a notable change." "Something to the tune of from 0 to 18 millions, replied the musketeer, gaily. "Ah, that was what your majesty wanted the day King Charles II came to Blois. The two states would not have been embroiled today, for I must say that there also I see another stumbling block." "Well, in the first place," replied Louis, "you are unjust, monsieur. For, if Providence had made me able to give my brother the million that day, you would not have quitted my service, and, consequently, you would not have made your fortune, as you told me just now you have done. But, in addition to this, I have had another piece of good fortune, and my difference with Great Britain need not alarm you." A valet de chambre interrupted the king by announcing M. Léon. "Come in, monsieur," said the king. "You are punctual. That is like a good servant. Let us see your letter to my brother Charles II." D'Artagnan pricked up his ears. "A moment, monsieur," said Louis carelessly to the Gascon. "I must expedite to London my consent to the marriage of my brother and the Duc d'Anjou with the Princess Henrietta Stuart." "He is knocking me about, it seems," murmured D'Artagnan, whilst the king signed the letter and dismissed M. de Léon. "But, ma foi, the more he knocks me about in this manner, the better I like it." The king followed M. de Léon with his eyes till the door was closed behind him. He even made 3 steps, as if he would follow the minister, but after these 3 steps, stopping, pausing, and coming back to the musketeer. "Now, monsieur," said he, "let us hasten to terminate our affair. You told me the other day, at Blois, that you were not rich, but I am now, sire." "Yes, but that does not concern me. You have your own money, not mine. That does not enter into my account." "I do not well understand what your majesty means." "Then, instead of leaving you to draw out words, speak spontaneously. Should you be satisfied with 20,000 livres a year as a fixed income?" "But, sire," said D'Artagnan, opening his eyes to the utmost, "would you be satisfied with 4 horses furnished and kept, and with a supplement of funds such as you might require, according to occasions and needs? Or would you prefer a fixed sum which would be, for example, 40,000 livres? Answer." "Sire, your majesty." "Yes, you are surprised. That is natural, and I expected it. Answer me, come, or I shall think you have no longer that rapidity of judgment I have so much admired in you. It is certain, sire, that 20,000 livres a year make a handsome sum. But—" "No buts. Yes or no, is an honorable indemnity." "Oh, very certainly." "You will be satisfied with it? That is well. It will be better to reckon the extra expenses separately. You can arrange that with Colbert." Now let us pass to something more important. But, sire, I told your majesty that you wanted rest. I know you did. Only I replied that I would not allow it. I am master, I suppose. Yes, sire, that is well. You were formerly in the way of becoming captain of the Musketeers. Yes, sire. Sire, I know he does. Then, am I to think you do put no faith in my word? Oh, sire, never, never dream of such a thing. I have wished to prove to you that you, so good a servant, had lost a good master. Am I anything like the master that will shoot you? I begin to think you are, sire. Then, monsieur, you will resume your functions. Your company is quite disorganized since your departure, and the men go about drinking and rioting in the cabarets where they fight, in spite of my edicts and those of my father. You will reorganize the service as soon as possible. Yes, sire, you will not again quit my person. Very well, sire. You will march with me to the army. You will encamp round my tent. Then, sire, said D'Artagnan, if it is only to impose upon me a service like that, your majesty need not give me 20,000 livres a year. I shall not earn them. I desire that you shall keep open house. I desire that you should keep a liberal table. I desire that my captain of musketeers should be a personage. And I, said D'Artagnan, bluntly, I do not like easily found money. I like money won. Your majesty gives me an idle trade, which the first comer will perform for 4,000 livres. Louis XIV began to laugh. You are a true Gascon, Monsieur D'Artagnan. You will draw my heart secret from me. Bah! Has your majesty a secret? Then? Yes, monsieur. Well, then I accept the 20,000 livres, for I will keep that secret, and discretion is above all price in these times. Will your majesty speak now? Boot yourself, Monsieur D'Artagnan, and to horse. Directly, sire. Within 2 days. That is well, sire, for I have my affairs to settle before I set out, particularly if it is likely there should be any blows stirring. That may happen. We can receive them. But, sire, you have addressed yourself to avarice, to ambition. You have addressed yourself to the heart of M. D'Artagnan. But you have forgotten one thing. What is that? You have said nothing to his vanity. When shall I be a knight of the king's orders? Does that interest you? Why, yes, sire. My friend Athos is quite covered with orders, and that dazzles me. You shall be a knight of my order a month after you have taken your commission of captain. Ah, said the officer, thoughtfully, after the expedition. Precisely. Where is your majesty going to send me? Are you acquainted with Bretagne? Have you any friends there? So much the better. Do you know anything about fortifications? I believe I do, sire, said D'Artagnan, smiling. That is to say, you can readily distinguish a fortress from a simple fortification, such as is allowed to chatelains or vassals. I distinguish a fort from a rampart as I distinguish a cuirass from a raised pie crust, sire. Is that sufficient? Yes, monsieur. You will set out, then. For Bretagne? Yes. Alone. Absolutely alone. That is to say, you must not even take a lackey with you. May I ask your majesty for what reason? Because, monsieur, it will be necessary to disguise yourself sometimes as the servant of a good family. Your face is very well known in France, M. D'Artagnan. And then, sire, and then you will travel slowly through Bretagne, and will examine carefully the fortifications of that country. The coasts? Yes, and the isles, commencing by Belle and Mer. Ah, which belongs to M. Fouquet, said D'Artagnan, in a serious tone, raising his intelligent eye to Louis XIV. I fancy you are right, monsieur, and that Belle Isle does belong to M. Fouquet. In fact, then your majesty wishes me to ascertain if Belle Isle is a strong place. Yes. If the fortifications of it are new or old, Precisely. And if the vessels of M. Fouquet are sufficiently numerous to form a garrison, that is what I want to know. You have placed your finger on the question. And if they are not fortifying, sire, you will travel about Bretagne, listening and judging. Then I am a king's spy, said D'Artagnan bluntly, twisting his mustache. No, monsieur. Your pardon, sire, I spy on your majesty's account. You start on a voyage of discovery, monsieur. Would you march at the head of your musketeers, with your sword in your hand, to observe any spot whatever, or an enemy's position? At this word, D'Artagnan started. Do you, continued the king, imagine yourself to be a spy? No, no, said D'Artagnan, but pensively. The thing changes its face when one observes an enemy. One is but a soldier. And if they are fortifying Belle Isle, added he, quickly, you will take an exact plan of the fortifications. Will they permit me to enter? That does not concern me. That is your affair. Did you not understand I reserved for you a supplement of 20,000 livres per annum, if you wished it? Yes, sire, but if they are not fortifying, you will return quietly, without fatiguing your horse. Sire, I am ready. You will begin tomorrow by going to Monsieur le Surintendant to take the first quarter of the pension I give you. Do you know M. Fouquet? Very little, sire, but I beg your majesty to observe that I don't think it immediately necessary that I should know him. Your pardon, monsieur, for he will refuse you the money I wish you to take, and it is at refusal I look for. Ah, said D'Artagnan. Then, sire, the money being refused, you will go and seek it at M. Colbert's. Apropos, have you a good horse? An excellent one, sire. How much did it cost you? 150 pistoles. I will buy it of you. Here is a note for 200 pistoles. But I want my horse for my journey, sire. Well, and you take mine from me. Not at all. On the contrary, I give it you. Only as it is now mine and not yours, I am sure you will not spare it. Your majesty is in a hurry, then a great hurry. Then what compels me to wait 2 days? Raisins known to myself. That's a different affair. The horse may make up the 2 days. In the 8 he has to travel, and then there is the post. No, the post compromises, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Begone and do not forget you are my servant. Sire, it is not my duty to forget it. At what hour tomorrow shall I take my leave of your majesty? Where do you lodge? I must henceforward lodge at the Louvre. That must not be now. Keep your lodgings in the city. I will pay for them. As to your departure, it must take place at night. You must set out without being seen by anyone. Or, if you are seen, it must not be known that you belong to me. Keep your mouth shut, monsieur. Your majesty spoils all you have said by that single word. I asked you where you lodged, for I cannot always send to M. le Comte de la Fere to seek you. I lodge with M. Planchet, a grocer, Rue des Lombards, at the sign of the Pylon d'Or. Go out but little, show yourself less, and await my orders. And yet, sire, I must go for the money. That is true, but when going to the superintendent's, where so many people are constantly going, you must mingle with the crowd. I want the notes, sire, for the money. Here they are. The king signed them, and D'Artagnan looked on, to assure himself of their regularity. Adieu, Monsieur D'Artagnan, added the king. I think you have perfectly understood me. I understand that your majesty sends me to Belle-Île, that is all. To learn how M. Fouquet's works are going on, that is all. Very well, I admit you may be taken. And I do not admit it, replied the Gascon, boldly. I admit you may be killed, continued the king. That is not probable, sire. In the first case, you must not speak. In the second, there must be no papers found upon you.